You have just woken up as a wild horse in a misty mountain valley. For the next 3 hours, you are going to experience a rushing river crossing, a hungry pack of wolves on your trail, and even a sudden snowstorm at night. And this won't be easy, so good luck. But before we get into this journey of a wild horse, I'd appreciate it if you could subscribe, like the video, and why not leave a comment on where you are tuning in from and what animal you want me to cover next. Now let's begin this epic adventure together. You drift back into awareness slowly, the way water seeps through sand. Your eyes haven't opened yet, but your body already knows things. The grass beneath your belly holds yesterday's warmth, but the air above carries that sharp bite that means the sun hasn't climbed high enough to burn off the night's chill. Your nostrils flare automatically, pulling in the first conscious breath of the day, and with it comes information. The wind moves from the northwest today, carrying scents of distant water and the green smell of grass that grew tall during the night's moisture. Somewhere, perhaps a mile away, hooves strike earth in a familiar rhythm. Not your herd, different cadence, different weight distribution. You file this knowledge away without alarm. Just information, catalogued and stored. Your eyes finally open, lashes heavy with dew. The world appears in sections. First, the immediate view. Grass stems creating a golden-green forest around your prone form. Each blade catches early light, some bent with water droplets that will vanish within the hour. Your focus shifts, adjusting to take in the middle distance where your herd members stand in their loose formation. Maria, the lead mare, stands 30 feet away with her head raised, ears rotating like satellite dishes. She's already been awake for minutes, maybe longer. Her vigilance gives the rest of you permission to wake slowly. The grass sea stretches beyond your small circle of familiar bodies. Prairie extends in every direction, rolling in gentle swells that mirror ocean waves. In this light, with morning mist rising in thin columns, you can almost believe you're at the bottom of some vast, breathing body of water. The grass moves constantly, responding to air currents you can feel against your hide, but can't always predict. Sometimes the movement travels toward you in visible lines, like something large pushing through the vegetation. Other times the entire field seems to pulse as one organism. Your internal clock tells you the sun sits about 15 degrees above the eastern horizon. This isn't knowledge you think about consciously. Instead, it arrives as a feeling, a sense of time's position that connects to hunger, to the urge to move, to the day's schedule written in instinct. Your shadow falls long and thin to the west, but it's already beginning its slow rotation toward the north. Rising requires consideration. You've been lying on your right side, legs folded beneath your barrel, head resting against the earth. Each joint must be consulted before movement begins. The shoulder that bore your weight through the night speaks first, reporting stiffness that will work itself out with motion. Your hips announce their readiness with small muscular adjustments. The process can't be rushed. A horse who rises too quickly signals panic to the herd, and panic spreads faster than fire through dry grass. You shift your weight forward, bringing your front legs beneath your chest. The movement creates small sounds. Leather on leather as hide moves across itself, the soft displacement of grass, the quiet rush of breath through your nostrils. These sounds form part of the morning's natural symphony. Somewhere to your left, Thomas is performing his own rising ritual, accompanied by a jaw-cracking yawn that ends in a gentle nicker. Finally, upright, you take inventory. All 4 legs report for duty. The left rear still carries a memory of yesterday's stone bruise, but the discomfort has faded to a whisper. You test each hoof against the earth, feeling for the give and resistance that tells you about ground conditions. The soil holds moisture from night's dew, but not enough to create mud. Good footing for the day ahead. Your first real look around confirms what your other senses already reported. The herd remains intact. 15 members, counting yourself, arranged in their customary loose diamond formation. Maria maintains her position at the northeast point, where she can monitor the prevailing wind and watch the route toward water. The yearlings cluster near the center, still learning their place in the group's geometry. Old Samuel occupies the southwest position, his grey muzzle lifted to test air currents with the patience of long experience. The distant hoofbeats you noticed while lying down have stopped. Either the other herd has settled into grazing, or they've moved beyond the range of your hearing. This information joins the morning's growing collection of facts: wind direction, temperature, moisture level, sun angle, herd positions, neighboring activity. All of it gets woven together into a picture of safety or threat, opportunity or caution. Your stomach offers its first commentary of the day, a gentle rumbling that reminds you of priorities. Grass grows all around you, but not all grass deserves the same attention. Your eyes scan the immediate area, noting the subtle differences that separate the merely edible from the truly nutritious. The stems closest to your front hooves show the purple-green tinge that means high sugar content. Those will make a good first course. But eating requires its own form of vigilance. A grazing horse presents a target, head down, attention focused on the ground. The herd's safety depends on staggered feeding, some members always alert while others crop grass. You glance toward Maria again, reading her posture for permission to begin your day's first meal. Her ears remain forward, scanning the grassland's perimeter, but her tail swishes in the relaxed rhythm that means all clear. The morning breeze carries new information now. Somewhere upwind, perhaps beyond the next rise, wildflowers have begun their daily opening. Their sweetness mixes with grass scent and the clean smell of water still hours away. These layers of odor create a map more detailed than anything eyes could provide, marking territories and resources, tracking the movement of other creatures through your shared world. Your shadow has shortened slightly since rising, confirming the sun's steady climb. Soon the dew will vanish, taking with it the morning's coolness and ushering in another day of heat and flies, and the constant decisions that keep the herd alive. But for now, in these suspended moments between night and day, you stand in the grass sea and let your senses paint the world in colors deeper than any rainbow. First light grazing. The first bite of morning grass carries the concentrated sweetness of night's moisture. Your lips work with practiced precision, selecting individual stems from the cluster at your feet. Not the thick, coarse blades that offer bulk but little nutrition, not the yellowed stalks that speak of plants past their prime. Instead, you choose the tender shoots, green with chlorophyll and heavy with the sugars that will fuel your massive body through the day ahead. Your incisors close around the selected stems with a sound like paper tearing. The grass yields cleanly, leaving neat cuts that won't damage the plant's ability to regrow. This matters, though you don't think about conservation in human terms. Instead, your grazing patterns follow instincts refined over millions of years, ensuring that the grassland that feeds you today will continue to feed you tomorrow. The torn grass moves to the back of your mouth where your molars wait. These aren't the sharp teeth of a predator, but broad, flat surfaces designed for grinding. The first chew releases more sweetness, along with a green taste that signals proper nutrition. Your jaw moves in the characteristic side-to-side motion, molars sliding across each other like millstones, breaking down cellulose walls and releasing the plant's stored energy. 27 chews. The number arrives without counting, another piece of inherited wisdom. Grass properly processed takes time, and time spent chewing is time invested in survival. Your digestive system works differently than that of creatures who can afford to bolt their food. Every blade must be thoroughly ground before it continues its journey through your four-chambered stomach system. The first swallow of the day carries particular satisfaction. You feel the processed grass move down your throat, beginning its long journey through your body's complex processing system. In your stomach, acids wait to continue the breakdown that began in your mouth. Beneficial bacteria stand ready to tackle the cellulose that your own enzymes cannot handle. The entire process will take hours, but it will extract every possible calorie from what most animals would consider inedible. Your head moves 3 steps to the left, following the patch of prime grazing. This too happens without conscious thought. Your eyes identify the next cluster of desirable grass while your mouth still works on the previous selection. Efficiency governs every movement. In a world where predators could appear at any moment, a horse who wastes time wastes life. The second bite brings different flavors. These stems grew in soil with different mineral content, perhaps where underground water runs closer to the surface. Your tongue identifies traces of iron, selenium, and other elements your body craves. Some horses develop cravings for specific minerals, seeking out particular patches of earth or unusual plants. You've seen Samuel spend entire afternoons licking at a salt deposit exposed by last year's erosion. Around you, the rest of the herd has begun their own morning feeding. The sound creates a gentle percussion, the tear of grass, the steady grinding of molars, the occasional shuffle of hooves as someone moves to a new patch. These sounds mean safety. A silent herd means danger, every head raised in alarm. A feeding herd means the world remains as it should be. Your peripheral vision tracks the movements of your nearest neighbors. Elena, a young mare with ambitions of leadership, grazes 15 feet to your right. Her feeding pattern shows inexperience. She takes larger bites, moves more frequently, and chews with less thoroughness. She'll learn, or she'll suffer the consequences of poor nutrition. The grassland teaches harsh lessons to those who don't listen. The yearling Thomas stays close to his mother, mimicking her grazing pattern. He's reached the age where grass provides most of his nutrition, but he still seeks the security of her presence. Occasionally he'll sample a plant his mother rejects, testing his developing palate against her experienced judgment. When he chooses poorly, his expression shows unmistakable disgust, ears pinned back as he spits out whatever bitter or toxic plant he's discovered. Your own mother taught you these same lessons years ago, though the memories have faded to impressions rather than clear pictures. The knowledge remains, though, encoded in your responses to different plants, different soil conditions, different seasons. You know to avoid the blue-green stems that appear after heavy rains, carrying a toxin that causes staggers. You know to seek out the red-tinged grasses that grow in areas where large animals have died, their decomposing bodies enriching the soil with nitrogen. The sun climbs higher, and with it comes the day's first warmth. The dew begins its retreat, droplets shrinking and disappearing as the air's capacity for moisture increases. Soon the grass will lose its night sweetness, becoming tougher and less palatable as plant sugars concentrate into defensive compounds. But for now, in these precious morning hours, the grazing remains prime. Your stomach offers a small rumble of satisfaction. The first phase of filling has begun, but you're still far from the 20 to 30 pounds of grass you'll consume before the day ends. Your body carries the memory of lean times, seasons when grass grew short and nutrition came hard. Those memories drive you to eat steadily when food is abundant, storing energy in layers of fat that might mean the difference between life and death during the next drought. The mechanical rhythm of grazing settles into your bones. Bite, chew, swallow, step. Bite, chew, swallow, step. The pattern has its own meditation, a moving prayer that connects you to the earth and the life it provides. Your breathing synchronizes with the rhythm, drawing in the sense of morning air and growing things. Maria lifts her head, ears swiveling toward the eastern horizon. The rest of the herd notices immediately, but her posture carries no alarm. She's simply checking, fulfilling her responsibility to monitor the world beyond the immediate grass. After a moment, she returns to feeding, and the herd's tension releases like a held breath. The grass beneath your hooves shows the marks of your feeding, neat cuts at consistent heights, evidence of your systematic approach to nutrition. Other creatures will benefit from your work. Insects will find easier access to lower grass layers. Small mammals will use the cropped areas for navigation. The grassland ecosystem depends on grazers like yourself to maintain its health and diversity. Your jaw muscles work with increasing efficiency as they warm up, the mechanical action becoming smoother and more powerful. The taste of grass changes subtly as your mouth adjusts to the day's first meal, saliva composition shifting to optimize digestion. Everything in your body works together, a biological machine evolved for the single purpose of extracting life from plants. The morning's first hour of grazing ends not with a decision but with a gradual awareness that it's time to move. Your immediate area has been systematically harvested, and continuing to graze here would mean accepting lower quality nutrition. Better to move now, while the sun still sits low enough to keep the grass tender, while the day's heat hasn't yet begun. It's assault on your hide and your energy. Waterhole ritual. The pull toward water begins as a whisper in your consciousness, barely noticeable at first beneath the rhythm of grazing. Your body tracks moisture levels with the precision of an internal gauge, monitoring the slow depletion that began with yesterday's heat and continues with each breath you exhale into the dry air. The sensation doesn't register as thirst, not yet. Instead, it arrives as a subtle awareness, a gentle insistence that grows stronger with each passing minute. Maria feels it too. You can tell by the way her head lifts more frequently between bites, her gaze turning consistently toward the southeast, where memory places the nearest reliable water source. She's calculating distance against need, weighing the safety of the current grazing area against the vulnerability that comes with movement. Waterholes attract more than just thirsty horses. They draw every creature that needs to drink, creating gatherings that can turn dangerous without warning. The decision comes as it always does, not as a sudden choice but as a gradual consensus. One by one, the herd members lift their heads, reading the same internal signals that tell you the morning's grazing has satisfied immediate hunger, but the day's hydration requirements remain unmet. Elena steps first in the direction of water, her young boldness serving the group's needs. When Maria doesn't pin her ears in correction, the rest of you understand that movement has been approved. Your hooves find the familiar path beaten into the earth by countless journeys to this same destination. The track winds between grass clumps and around the scattered stones that mark ancient watercourses, now dry for most of the year. Each step sends small vibrations up through your legs, your body reading the terrain's messages through the soles of your feet. The ground here feels different from the grazing areas, harder packed from the constant traffic of animals following their need to drink. The journey takes on its own rhythm. Walk, pause, scan, walk. The pauses serve multiple purposes. They allow the herd to maintain formation, preventing dangerous spreading that would make defense impossible. They provide opportunities to test the air for scents that might signal trouble ahead. Most importantly, they honor the ancient caution that keeps prey animals alive. Never approach a water source without careful surveillance. Your nostrils work constantly as you travel, passing the information carried on each breath. The smell of water grows stronger with each step, but it comes layered with other intelligence. The muddy scent of the creek bank, rich with decomposing vegetation and the mineral taste of dissolved soil. The sharper odor of bird droppings from the waterfowl that frequent the shallows. The complex bouquet of scents left by other animals who visited the waterhole in recent hours. A quarter mile from your destination, you catch the first traces of something concerning. Cat smell, faint but unmistakable, crossing the path at an angle that suggests a predator moving parallel to the creek rather than toward it. The scent carries the staleness that indicates age, perhaps a day or more, but predator sign never receives casual treatment. Your pace slows automatically, and you notice the herd's formation tightening as others detect the same warning. Maria processes the information with characteristic calm. Her head rises higher, ears forward, but she doesn't signal immediate retreat. Instead, she adjusts the approach route, leading the group along a path that will bring you to the water from upstream, where the wind will carry any fresh danger scents directly to your vigilant nostrils. The detour adds distance but purchases safety, a trade any experienced horse makes without question. The sound of moving water reaches you before the creek becomes visible. It's a gentle murmur rather than a rush, indicating the low water levels typical of late summer. Good news and bad news combined. Low water means easier drinking, no need to navigate treacherous banks or wade into depths that could hide threats. But it also means concentrated activity, all the area's wildlife forced to use the same limited access points. Your first glimpse of the waterhole confirms expectations. The creek has narrowed to a channel barely wider than your body, flowing between banks that rise only inches above the water level. The familiar depression where countless hooves have worn away the bank creates a natural drinking platform, its edges softened by mud that holds the tracks of yesterday's visitors. Deer prints, the hand-like marks of raccoons, the surprisingly delicate impressions left by the local fox family, but no fresh cat tracks. Your eyes scan the area methodically, checking not just the immediate banks but the surrounding grass where a predator might wait in ambush. The vegetation shows no signs of recent disturbance, no places where a heavy body has pressed down the stems, or where nervous movement has created unusual patterns in the growth. Maria approaches the water's edge first, as protocol demands. Her hooves test the bank's stability with each step, reading the ground's firmness through her sensitive feet. Mud can hide dangerous soft spots that might trap a hoof or cause a fall, and a fallen horse at a waterhole becomes an easy target for any predator bold enough to take advantage of such vulnerability. The water itself appears clean, moving fast enough to avoid stagnation but not so swift as to indicate recent storms upstream. Its surface reflects the morning sky in fragments broken by tiny ripples, each disturbance catching light and scattering it in brief sparkles. The sight triggers responses older than thought, evolutionary rewards for finding clean water that your ancestors coded into your nervous system millions of years ago. Your turn comes fourth in the drinking order, after Maria, Samuel, and Elena have each taken their measured portions. The hierarchy isn't cruel, simply practical. The most experienced horses drink first, their greater knowledge serving the herd's safety. If the water carries contamination, better that the dispensable members discover it than risk the leaders whose judgment keeps everyone alive. The first touch of water against your muzzle sends recognition through your entire body. Cool, clean, carrying the mineral taste of the rocks over which it flows. Your lips part slightly, testing the liquid's temperature and quality before commitment. Some water sources carry dangers: algae blooms that cause colic, mineral concentrations that lead to colic, contamination from upstream sources that can poison an entire herd. But this water passes every test your senses can provide. You lower your muzzle deeper, feeling the pleasant shock of coolness against your warm skin. Your first drink brings immediate relief to tissues already beginning to show the stress of morning activity. The liquid flows down your throat with a satisfaction that reaches every cell, beginning the complex process of rehydration that will prepare your body for the day's remaining challenges. Between drinks, you lift your head to scan the surroundings. This practice serves both safety and social purposes. Predators often time their attacks for moments when prey animals are most vulnerable, heads down and attention focused on drinking. But the breaks also allow you to monitor your herd mates, ensuring that everyone gets their turn and that no individual monopolizes the resource. The water carries information beyond mere hydration. Dissolved minerals tell stories about the land through which the creek flows, providing your body with trace elements essential for health. Iron from the red rocks upstream, calcium from limestone deposits, salt from ancient seabeds now far underground. Your system absorbs and utilizes these nutrients without conscious direction, another marvel of evolutionary engineering. Your reflection wavers in the water's surface, broken and reformed by the gentle current. For a moment, you see yourself as others might, a large, powerful animal whose survival depends on constant vigilance and wise choices. The image reminds you of your place in the world's complex web, neither predator nor completely helpless prey, but something in between requiring both strength and wisdom. The drinking ritual concludes with the same gradual consensus that began it. One by one, herd members lift their heads and step back from the water's edge, their immediate needs satisfied. The return journey will follow a different route, another safety measure that prevents predictable patterns from becoming deadly habits. Mid-morning flies, flicks. The first fly of the day announces itself with the delicate touch of 6 tiny legs settling on your shoulder, just behind the point where your neck meets your withers. The sensation registers immediately, a minute disruption in the smooth flow of nerve signals across your hide. Your skin responds before conscious thought intervenes, muscle fibers contracting in a localized shiver that ripples outward from the point of contact. The fly lifts off, circles once, and settles again 3 inches closer to your spine. This begins the day's long dance of irritation and response, a constant negotiation between your body's need for comfort and the insect world's relentless hunger for the salt and moisture your hide provides. The morning's cool air had kept most flying pests inactive, but the sun's climbing angle has awakened them to their daily assault on anything warm-blooded and available. Your tail sweeps across your flanks in the first deliberate anti-fly maneuver of the day. The long black hair moves with surprising precision, guided by muscles that can place each strand exactly where needed. The motion doesn't require conscious direction any more than breathing does. Instead, it flows from the same deep programming that governs heartbeat and digestion, automatic responses refined over millions of years of coexistence with biting insects. But flies learn too. The one on your shoulder times its approach to your tail's rhythm, landing during the brief pause between sweeps. Its proboscis extends toward your skin, seeking the microscopic moisture that beads constantly from your pores. The touch triggers another skin shiver, this one sharper and more focused. The fly maintains its grip, experienced enough to ride out the minor earthquake of your defensive response. A second fly joins the first, then a third. They seem to communicate through means you can't detect, their arrival coordinated as if responding to some signal invisible to your senses. Soon a small constellation of irritants decorates your hide, each one a tiny anchor point of annoyance that demands response. Your left hind leg rises in the classic fly kick, hoof describing a precise arc that brings it into contact with your belly just behind your ribcage. The movement serves multiple purposes. It dislodges several flies, provides a satisfying scratch to skin that has begun to itch, and delivers a warning vibration through your entire body that announces your willingness to defend yourself against pest invasion. The kick creates a brief moment of peace, but peace never lasts long in the eternal war against flies. They regroup and return with reinforcements, their tiny brains apparently incapable of learning that your hide offers nothing but frustration. Or perhaps they do learn, but hunger overrides wisdom just as it does in larger creatures faced with necessary risks. Elena has developed her own anti-fly strategy, one that involves rolling. She selects a patch of ground with the right texture, neither too soft nor too hard, free of stones but with enough dust to coat her hide. Her preliminary inspection takes several minutes, hooves testing the soil's give, nostrils checking for any scents that might indicate recent predator activity. Rolling requires complete vulnerability, and the decision to indulge must be made carefully. When she finally commits to the roll, the process unfolds with surprising grace. Elena folds her legs and lowers her massive bulk to the ground, then rocks sideways until gravity takes over. The movement that follows looks chaotic but serves precise purposes. Each twist and turn coats a different section of her hide, with dust that will clog insect breathing passages and make landing difficult. The friction also provides relief from the constant low-level itching that accompanies life in a world full of tiny tormentors. You watch Elena's dust bath with something approaching envy, but your own position in the herd's formation doesn't allow for such extended vulnerability. Instead, you develop other strategies. A low-hanging branch from the lone cottonwood offers scratching opportunities, its bark rough enough to provide relief but not so coarse as to damage your hide. You position yourself carefully, aligning the itchiest spot on your neck with the branch's most promising projection. The scratch that follows brings satisfaction that borders on the transcendent. Your entire body relaxes as pressure and friction combine to address irritations that have been building since your last opportunity for proper maintenance. The tree bark catches loose hair and dead skin, cleaning your coat, while providing the deep massage that muscles crave after hours of supporting your substantial weight. But even scratching carries social implications. Thomas, the young stallion, approaches with obvious interest in using the same branch. Protocol requires negotiation. You're older, more experienced, and therefore entitled to continue your scratch session until satisfaction is achieved. Thomas understands this, but his body language shows increasing desperation as his own fly burden becomes intolerable. The compromise comes naturally. You shift position slightly, making room for Thomas to address his most urgent needs while you continue working on your own problem areas. Side-by-side scratching creates an opportunity for social bonding, the physical contact reinforcing herd relationships while serving practical purposes. Thomas's scratching style reveals his inexperience. He approaches the branch too aggressively, scraping rather than rubbing, creating minor skin irritation rather than relief. You demonstrate proper technique through example, showing how to use the tree's surface to maximum advantage without causing damage. These lessons happen constantly within the herd, knowledge passed from older to younger through observation and imitation. The fly population continues to build as the sun climbs higher. Different species prefer different times of day, and the morning shift gives way to more aggressive varieties as temperatures rise. Deer flies with their painful bites, horse flies large enough to create audible buzzing, and the tiny gnats that seek out the moisture around your eyes and nostrils. Each type requires different defensive strategies. Your ears become weapons in the fight against small tormentors. The constant rotation and flicking motion serves the dual purpose of monitoring environmental sounds and discouraging flies from settling near your head. Ears can target specific areas with remarkable precision, creating air currents that make landing difficult for even the most determined insects. Occasionally, the annoyance level builds beyond what passive resistance can handle. When this happens, you resort to more dramatic measures. A full-body shake sends ripples through your hide from nose to tail, creating a brief earthquake that dislodges everything not permanently attached. The motion requires significant energy, but the relief it provides makes the expenditure worthwhile. Your head swings left and right in movements that look random but follow patterns designed to maximize fly disruption. The long muscles of your neck provide power for sweeping motions that create turbulence around your head and shoulders. Your forelock, the long hair that hangs between your ears, becomes a natural fly whisk, constantly in motion as you shake your head in response to nasal irritation. The herd's collective anti-fly activity creates a rhythm all its own. Tail swishes, head shakes, leg kicks, and skin shivers combine into a percussion ensemble that speaks of shared struggle against shared annoyance. The sounds provide comfort through their familiarity, confirmation that everyone faces the same challenges and responds with the same ancient solutions. Samuel, the old gelding, has developed the most sophisticated fly defense system in the herd. His positioning takes advantage of prevailing breezes, and he's learned to time his movements to create maximum disruption with minimum energy expenditure. Age has taught him efficiency, and he manages to stay more comfortable than younger horses who waste energy on ineffective flailing. The morning's fly battle establishes patterns that will continue throughout the day, intensifying with heat and humidity, subsiding during periods of strong wind or heavy overcast. Your body will maintain its constant vigilance, skin and muscles working together to preserve comfort and prevent the more serious problems that can develop when biting insects are allowed unrestricted access to your hide. Afternoon heat shimmer. The sun has found its full strength now, beating down with an intensity that transforms the morning's gentle warmth into something that demands respect. The air itself seems to thicken, becoming visible in shimmering waves that rise from the heated earth and dance across your field of vision. The grass that felt cool and welcoming hours ago now radiates heat upward, creating an oven effect that wraps around your legs and belly. Your breathing changes without conscious decision, becoming deeper and more deliberate. Each inhalation draws superheated air into your lungs, and your body works harder to extract the oxygen it needs, while managing the thermal load that comes with every breath. The moisture you exhale carries away precious water, but the process can't be stopped. Cooling takes priority over conservation when the alternative is overheating. The herd has begun to string out across the landscape, seeking individual solutions to the common problem of heat management. The tight formation that provided safety during morning grazing spreads into a loose collection of animals, each following personal strategies for staying comfortable. Maria leads the migration toward the cottonwood, her experience telling her that shade will soon become more valuable than the best grazing. Your internal temperature gauge registers the subtle but significant climb that signals the beginning of heat stress. Not dangerous yet, but approaching the threshold where action becomes necessary. Your heart rate increases slightly, not from exertion but from the cardiovascular adjustments needed to move heated blood from your core to your extremities, where it can release thermal energy to the surrounding air. The first beads of sweat appear along your neck, tiny droplets that catch the light like scattered diamonds. Sweating represents your body's most sophisticated cooling mechanism, but it comes at a cost. Each drop carries away water and salt that will need replacement, and your internal monitoring systems track the mounting deficit even as they authorize continued moisture loss. Your hide has become a complex thermal management system, blood vessels dilating near the surface to bring heated blood into contact with air currents, while deeper tissues work to insulate vital organs from temperature extremes. The process happens automatically, but you can feel its effects as warmth spreads through your body in waves, each pulse bringing relief to overheated muscles. The cottonwood's shade beckons like a cool oasis in the growing furnace of afternoon, but reaching it requires crossing 30 yards of open ground where the sun's assault will be unrelenting. You calculate the cost against the benefit, balancing the energy expenditure of movement against the relief that waits beneath the tree's protective canopy. The decision comes when a cloud passes overhead, providing temporary relief that makes movement possible. You step quickly but deliberately toward the shade, hooves finding the path that will minimize exposure time. The brief respite of cloud shadow feels like diving into cool water, your body sighing with relief even as it prepares for the thermal shock of returning to direct sunlight. Other herd members have had the same inspiration. The space beneath the cottonwood becomes contested territory, not through aggression, but through the subtle negotiations that govern all herd resource allocation. Maria claims the choicest spot, naturally, where the shade falls deepest and air currents provide the most cooling. The rest of you arrange yourselves according to social hierarchy and practical considerations. Your chosen position offers decent shade coverage and places you downwind from the others, ensuring access to whatever cooling breeze might develop. The ground beneath the tree feels marginally cooler than the surrounding prairie, though the difference may be more psychological than physical. Still, every degree matters when your body works so hard to maintain stable internal temperature. Standing still becomes an art form in this heat. Too much movement generates internal heat that overwhelms your cooling systems. Too little movement allows blood to pool in your extremities, reducing the circulation that carries heat away from vital organs. You develop a gentle rocking motion, shifting weight from leg to leg, that maintains circulation without creating excess thermal load. Your tail works overtime now, but its function has evolved beyond fly control. Each sweep moves air across your flanks, creating tiny breezes that enhance evaporative cooling. The motion becomes hypnotic, synchronized with your breathing and heartbeat, part of the physiological symphony that keeps you functional in conditions that would overwhelm less adapted creatures. The landscape itself seems to pulse with heat. Distant objects waver as if seen through water, their outlines softened by the thermal distortion that rises from superheated surfaces. The effect makes depth perception difficult, turning the normally predictable prairie into something alien and unstable. Your eyes water slightly as they struggle to focus through the shimmering air. Water loss accelerates as the heat builds. Your mouth feels increasingly dry despite the morning's drink, and your body begins to signal the need for another trip to the creek. But the sun's position tells you that peak heat still lies ahead, and moving now would mean abandoning shade for a journey across exposed ground. Better to wait, endure, and make the water run during the late afternoon when shadows begin to lengthen. Your breathing pattern shifts again, becoming shallower and more rapid. This change reduces the volume of superheated air entering your lungs while maintaining adequate oxygen exchange. The adjustment happens automatically, controlled by systems that monitor blood chemistry and respond to changing conditions without requiring conscious oversight. Elena has found a different solution to the heat problem. She's positioned herself where a slight depression in the ground creates a natural cooling pocket, and she's begun pawing at the earth to expose the cooler soil underneath. The technique shows promise, and you file it away for future reference. Innovation in comfort strategies can mean the difference between suffering and survival during the season's hottest days. The heat affects your appetite as well. The drive to graze that dominated the morning hours fades as your body redirects energy toward temperature regulation. Digestion generates internal heat, and your instincts wisely postpone major food processing until conditions improve. Your stomach accepts this decision without complaint, understanding that survival takes precedence over satisfaction. Time seems to slow in the heat, each minute stretching like the thermal waves that rise from the prairie. Your awareness narrows to immediate concerns: the quality of your breathing, the efficiency of your cooling systems, the precious shade that makes this temperature bearable. The wider world retreats behind the shimmer, leaving only the essential business of staying alive until the sun begins its descent. Thomas has given up on dignity entirely, lying down in whatever shade he can claim and pressing his body against the earth in search of cooling contact. Youth makes him less skilled at heat management, and his discomfort shows in every line of his posture. You remember your own first experiences with serious heat, the panic that came with discovering your body's limitations, the gradual learning that led to better coping strategies. The cottonwood's leaves hang motionless in the still air, their surfaces turned to catch what little breeze might develop. Even the tree struggles with the heat, conserving moisture by reducing the surface area exposed to the sun's assault. Everything in this environment has evolved strategies for surviving the thermal extremes that define prairie life. Your shadow has shortened to a small pool directly beneath your body, confirming the sun's approach to its daily zenith. The worst is yet to come, but you've found your position and made your preparations. Now comes the waiting, the patient endurance that separates successful prairie animals from those who fall victim to the landscape's unforgiving moods. The heat shimmer continues its dance across the grassland, creating a world that wavers between real and unreal, solid and liquid, familiar and strange. In this distorted landscape, survival becomes an art form practiced by creatures who understand that comfort is temporary, but endurance is everything. Low rumble on the ridge. The first sign comes not through your ears, but through your bones. A vibration so low and distant that it registers as sensation rather than sound, traveling through the earth itself before the air carries any audible warning. Your hooves, pressed against the sun-baked prairie soil, receive the message first. Somewhere beyond the visible horizon, the sky has begun its ancient argument with itself. Your nostrils flare automatically, testing the air for the particular scent signature that accompanies atmospheric disturbance. The smell isn't there yet, but your body prepares for its arrival anyway. Muscles that had relaxed in the cottonwood's shade tense slightly, not with alarm but with the subtle readiness that marks the difference between prey animals who survive and those who don't. The horizon to the northwest shows the first visual confirmation of what your deeper senses already suspected. A darkness that isn't quite cloud and isn't quite shadow builds along the edge of the world, too distant yet to reveal its true nature but substantial enough to command attention. The afternoon heat shimmer makes observation difficult, distorting the approaching weather system into something that wavers between threat and illusion. Maria notices the change in your posture and follows your gaze toward the distant disturbance. Her experience reading weather signs exceeds even your own, accumulated through seasons of survival that have taught her to recognize danger long before it announces itself obviously. Her ears swivel forward, then back, then forward again, as she processes information from multiple senses simultaneously. The air pressure begins its subtle decline, a change so gradual that consciousness barely registers it. But your inner ear contains sensors calibrated to detect the smallest atmospheric variations, and the readings they provide trigger responses throughout your nervous system. The sensation feels like standing at the bottom of a very deep well, with the weight of invisible air pressing down from above. Other herd members pick up the signals too, each responding according to their individual sensitivity and experience. Old Samuel lifts his grey muzzle toward the approaching darkness, nostrils working steadily as he samples air currents for the complex bouquet of scents that building weather systems create. His calmness provides reassurance, but his alertness confirms that attention is warranted. The temperature hasn't dropped yet, but the quality of heat begins to change. The relentless dry burning that characterized the peak afternoon gives way to something heavier and more oppressive. Humidity climbs imperceptibly as distant moisture begins its slow migration across the prairie, still hours away, but already influencing the local atmosphere in ways your body reads instinctively. Thunder remains beyond the range of hearing, but electromagnetic effects precede the storm's audible announcements by many miles. The hair along your mane responds to static charges building in the distant atmosphere. Individual strands lifting slightly from your neck in responses to forces that won't be explained by human science for millions of years. Your tail switches with increased frequency, responding to the same electrical influences. The light begins to change as high clouds, invisible against the bright sky, start filtering the sun's direct radiation. The shift is subtle at first, a softening of shadows rather than any obvious dimming, but your eyes detect the difference immediately. Colors across the landscape lose some of their harsh contrast, and the heat shimmer that has danced above the prairie all afternoon starts to settle as thermal currents become less violent. A breeze stirs for the first time since morning, not the gentle air movement that brings relief from heat, but something with purpose behind it. The grass responds with a synchronized rustling that sounds almost like whispered conversation. This wind carries information. The sharp ozone scent that precedes electrical storms, the green smell of rain falling on vegetation somewhere beyond your sight, the clean coolness that promises relief from the day's thermal assault. Your internal barometer continues registering the pressure drop, and with it comes a peculiar restlessness that has nothing to do with conscious decision. The urge to move builds gradually, not panic but a growing sense that remaining stationary may not serve the herd's best interests. Storm survival often depends on positioning, finding shelter or high ground, or simply avoiding the worst of whatever the sky decides to deliver. Elena paces beneath her section of the cottonwood's shade, her youth making her more sensitive to the atmospheric disturbance. She lacks the experience to interpret what her senses report, and the unknown nature of the approaching weather system triggers anxiety responses that show in every line of her posture. Her breathing quickens slightly, and she tosses her head with increasing frequency. The darkness on the horizon develops definition as it draws closer. What appeared as a vague shadow now reveals itself as a line of towering clouds, their tops invisible against the bright sky but their bases dark with the promise of precipitation. The formation moves with the ponderous inevitability of all massive weather systems, covering ground at a pace that seems slow until you calculate the distances involved. Lightning flickers within the cloud mass, still too distant to produce audible thunder but visible as brief illuminations that outline the storm's internal architecture. The electrical discharges trigger responses in your nervous system, ancient warnings encoded in prey animal DNA that associate electrical storms with danger. Not immediate danger, but the kind of threat that requires preparation and wise positioning. Maria makes the decision for the herd through subtle body language that communicates her intentions without creating panic. She steps away from the cottonwood's shade, positioning herself to lead movement toward higher ground where drainage will prevent dangerous flooding. Her calm confidence provides reassurance, even as her actions acknowledge the approaching weather's potential severity. The wind strengthens, bringing with it the first droplets of moisture that have traveled hundreds of miles to reach this precise location. Not rain yet, just humidity dense enough to provide relief from the afternoon's desiccating heat. Your hide responds gratefully, pores opening to absorb whatever moisture the air offers, while your respiratory system extracts precious water from each breath. Thunder announces itself finally, a rumble so distant and prolonged that it seems to emerge from the earth itself rather than the sky above. The sound carries complex messages, the storm's size, indicated by the duration of each thunderclap, its distance, measured by the delay between lightning and sound, its intensity, revealed by the depth and power of the acoustic signature. Your hooves register vibrations from the thunder's passage through the ground, confirming what your ears already reported. The storm covers significant territory and moves with the kind of energy that can reshape landscapes. Not necessarily dangerous to creatures who make wise choices, but demanding of respect and appropriate response. The approaching weather system has begun to dominate the northwestern sky, towering upward to heights that dwarf even the most massive mountains. The cloud formation shows the characteristic anvil shape that marks a mature thunderstorm, its top flattened against the upper atmosphere, while its base continues building downward toward the earth. Atmospheric pressure continues its decline, creating subtle effects throughout your body. Your joints respond to the changing barometric conditions, old injuries providing more reliable weather prediction than any human instrument. The sensation isn't painful, just a heightened awareness of your body's mechanical systems as they adjust to the shifting environmental conditions. The storm's electrical field grows stronger as the system approaches, creating static charges that make your mane and tail respond with increasing sensitivity. The air itself seems to thicken with potential energy, and you can taste metal on your tongue, the characteristic flavor that precedes serious electrical activity. Rain begins somewhere beyond your sight, evidenced by the fresh scent that rides the strengthening wind and the subtle change in the light quality as precipitation intercepts and scatters the sun's rays. The approaching precipitation carries promises of relief from heat and dust, but also warnings about flash floods, dangerous footing, and the vulnerability that comes with reduced visibility. The low rumble that began this chapter of the day has evolved into a continuous background percussion, punctuated by the sharper cracks of closer lightning strikes. The storm system has established its presence and announced its intentions. Now comes the crucial period of approach and passage, when wise decisions mean the difference between refreshing relief and life-threatening danger. Flash, deluge. The air changes first, always. A heaviness settles across the grassland like an invisible blanket being pulled tight. Your nostrils flare wide, catching something electric and sharp, mixed with the familiar scents of prairie grass and distant water. The herd feels it too. Ears swivel forward, then back, then forward again. Heads lift from grazing in that slow, deliberate way that means attention without alarm. Above, the sky has been building something all afternoon. What started as white cotton balls scattered across blue has grown into towering grey mountains that reach toward places you cannot see. The sun still shines where you stand, but its light has taken on a strange quality, more golden than usual, as if it knows its time is limited. A mare nearby stamps once, shifts her weight, her foal presses closer to her side. These small movements ripple through the group like stones dropped in still water. No one panics, no one runs. This is simply the way of things, the way storms announce themselves to those who know how to listen. The first drops arrive like tiny messengers, each one landing with its own small splash against your hide. They're warm, these early drops, carrying the heat of the clouds they fell from. One lands on your muzzle, another on your shoulder blade. You shake your head gently, more from instinct than annoyance. The rain tastes different than the creek water you know, sharper somehow, charged with the energy of its long fall from the sky. More drops follow, then more still. The sound begins as whispers against the grass, barely audible above the constant prairie wind. But whispers grow into murmurs, murmurs into conversations, conversations into a steady rhythm that seems to come from everywhere at once. The earth beneath your hooves begins to change, dust particles clinging together, forming tiny dark patches that spread and connect, like a map being drawn in real time. The wind picks up, carrying new scents now. Wet earth, the green smell of grass drinking deeply, the metallic tang that comes before lightning. Your tail swishes once, twice, then settles. The herd moves without discussion, bodies shifting closer together, not from fear but from ancient wisdom. There is safety in numbers, comfort in the familiar warmth of those who share your world. Thunder rolls across the sky like boulders tumbling down an invisible mountainside. Deep, resonant, felt as much in your chest as heard with your ears. The foals press closer to their mothers. The stallion lifts his head high, nostrils wide, reading the storm's intentions in ways that go beyond sight or sound. His calm spreads through the group like ripples in a pond. Now the rain comes in earnest, no longer individual drops, but sheets of water that dance across the grassland in visible waves. Each drop that strikes your hide sends tiny vibrations through your skin, awakening nerve endings that have been waiting for this moment. Your coat darkens as the water soaks through, but beneath it, you remain warm, protected by layers of fat and muscle and the steady heat of your own life force. The ground beneath your hooves transforms, dust becomes mud, hard earth softens, and small streams begin to form where none existed moments before. The sound of water hitting earth creates a symphony that drowns out almost everything else, yet somehow makes everything clearer. The drumming on your back, the splash of your hooves as you shift position, the collective breathing of the herd, all of it blends into something larger than the sum of its parts. Lightning splits the sky in brilliant white lines that last only long enough to burn themselves into memory. For that brief moment, the world becomes a photograph, all sharp edges and stark contrasts. The prairie grasses bend and sway like dancers frozen mid-step. The other horses stand like statues carved from shadow and light. Then darkness returns, and the thunder follows, shaking the very air you breathe. But you do not flee. None of you do. This is not your first storm, nor will it be your last. You have learned, as your ancestors learned, that some forces are too vast to fight and too powerful to fear. Instead, you stand together, letting the rain wash over you, letting the wind tangle your mane, letting the lightning illuminate the edges of your world before returning it to darkness. The storm's intensity ebbs and flows like breathing. moments of fury followed by moments of gentleness, as if the sky itself is learning how to reign. During the quiet interludes, you can hear the soft nickers of reassurance passing between mother and foal, the gentle shuffling of hooves in mud, the contented sighs of those who have made peace with being wet. And gradually, as all storms must, this one begins to spend its energy. The lightning moves further away, the thunder becomes a distant conversation rather than a present argument. The rain continues, but softer now, more like a friend's touch than a stranger's demand. The air smells clean, washed, full of possibilities that didn't exist before the clouds opened. Standing there in the aftermath, water dripping from your mane and tail, you feel something that has no name but is perfectly understood. It is the satisfaction of having weathered what needed to be weathered, of having stood steady while the world around you changed. The grass will grow greener tomorrow. The streams will run fuller. The earth will remember this gift of water long after the clouds have moved on to other skies. This is the way of storms, and this is the way of horses. Both know when to be fierce and when to be gentle, when to move and when to stand still, when to fight and when to simply endure until the storm passes and the sun returns to reclaim its place in the sky. Rival on the wind. The scent arrives before anything else, carried on the morning breeze like a message written in a language older than words. Your head lifts from the sweet grass, nostrils flaring wide to pull in every molecule of information the wind offers. It's unmistakable, this smell, male, strong, unknown, and moving this way. The stallion who leads your band catches it too. His entire body changes in an instant, muscles shifting beneath his dark coat like water moving under ice. His neck arches higher, his tail flags slightly, and his ears lock forward with the intensity of a hunter who has spotted prey. But this is not about hunting. This is about something far more primal, far more personal. The mares sense the change without needing to understand its source. Heads lift throughout the group, eyes scanning the horizon for whatever has captured their protector's attention. The foals press closer to their mother's sides, instinctively knowing that when the adults grow alert, safety lies in proximity. The yearlings cluster together, old enough to sense danger, but too young to know what form it might take. There, emerging from the low rise that marks the eastern edge of your territory, a silhouette appears. At first, just a dark shape against the pale morning sky, but as he draws closer, details begin to emerge. He is large, this stranger, perhaps slightly larger than your own stallion. His coat gleams in the early light, muscles moving with the fluid grace of one who knows his own power. His mane flows behind him like a banner, and even at this distance, you can see the proud arch of his neck, the confident swing of his stride. Your stallion moves forward, placing himself between the approaching stranger and his family. There is no hesitation in this movement, no moment of doubt or fear. This is what he was born for, what every instinct in his body has been preparing him for since the day he first drew breath. His hooves drum against the earth in a rhythm that speaks of ownership, of territorial rights, of lines that shall not be crossed. The stranger slows his approach but does not stop. His own posture mirrors that of your protector, neck arched, tail held high, every muscle announcing his presence and his intentions. He calls out then, a sound that cuts through the morning air like a blade through silk. It is not quite a whinny, not quite a scream, but something between the two, something that carries challenge and invitation in equal measure. Your stallion answers, his own voice rising to meet the challenge. The sound sends shivers through the watching herd, not from fear but from recognition of something ancient and inevitable. This is the way disputes are settled in your world, not through stealth or cunning but through open declaration of intent. Let there be no misunderstanding about what is at stake here. The two males begin to circle each other, maintaining a distance that speaks of respect for each other's power while making clear their unwillingness to back down. They move with the careful precision of dancers, each step calculated, each gesture loaded with meaning. The stranger paws the ground, sending clods of earth flying behind him. Your stallion responds in kind, his own hooves striking the earth with sounds like thunder. They are magnificent, both of them, caught in this ritual that is older than memory. Their coats gleam with health and strength, their eyes bright with the fire of competition. Steam rises from their bodies as adrenaline heats their blood, and their breathing comes in sharp snorts that cloud the cool morning air. This is what they were made for, these moments when everything else falls away except the pure test of will against will, strength against strength. The circling continues, each revolution bringing them slightly closer to the inevitable clash. They size each other up with the calculating gaze of warriors, noting weak points, assessing advantages, measuring the commitment in each other's eyes. Your stallion's experience shows in the economy of his movements, the way he conserves energy while still projecting power. The stranger's youth shows in his eagerness, the slight tremor of barely contained energy that runs through his frame. Finally, as if by some unspoken signal, they rear. 2 tons of muscle and bone rising into the air, front hooves striking out like clubs, teeth bared in grimaces that could tear flesh from bone. They crash together with a sound like trees falling, hooves seeking purchase on shoulders and necks, teeth snapping for any available target. The earth trembles beneath their weight as they grapple, neither able to gain a decisive advantage. They separate, circle again, rear again. This time your stallion's experience shows as he twists at the last moment, avoiding the worst of the stranger's attack while landing a solid blow of his own. The challenger staggers but does not fall, recovering quickly and launching his own counterattack with renewed fury. The battle continues in waves, moments of fierce contact followed by periods of cautious circling. Both horses stream with sweat now, their breathing loud and labored, but neither shows any sign of backing down. The stranger is strong, perhaps even stronger than your protector, but strength alone is not enough. Your stallion has something the challenger lacks, knowledge of what he fights for. Every mare in the herd, every foal at their sides, every member of the family he has protected through harsh winters and dry summers, they are all here in this moment with him. Their safety, their future, their very lives depend on the outcome of this contest, and that knowledge, that responsibility, gives him a strength that goes beyond muscle and bone. The end, when it comes, arrives not with dramatic fury but with a moment of perfect understanding. The stranger, breathing hard, stands with his head lowered, no longer meeting your stallion's eyes. It is not defeat, exactly, but acknowledgement. He has tested himself against a worthy opponent and found the measure of both his own strength and his opponent's. There is no shame in this recognition, only the wisdom that comes from understanding one's place in the world. Your stallion approaches, no longer aggressive but not yet friendly. He extends his muzzle toward the stranger, in a gesture that is part warning, part invitation. The message is clear. You are strong, you are worthy, but this family is mine to protect. Find your own territory, gather your own herd, but do not challenge what I have built here. The stranger lifts his head one final time, looks across the assembled mares and foals, then turns and trots away. His departure is neither hurried nor ashamed, but carries the dignity of one who has tested himself and learned something valuable in the process. He will find his own place in the world, as all must, but it will not be here. As the dust settles and the stranger disappears over the same rise from which he emerged, your stallion returns to his family. The mares nicker softly in greeting, the foals venture out from their mother's sides, and gradually the normal rhythms of the day reassert themselves. But something has changed. Some lesson has been learned about the price of safety and the strength required to maintain it. The grass still grows sweet and green, the sun still warms your backs, but now you all know a little more about the world beyond your small corner of it, and the vigilance required to keep that corner safe. Evening patches of quiet. The tension drains away slowly, like water seeping into thirsty earth. Your stallion stands where the stranger left him, sides still heaving from the contest, but already his posture begins to soften. The rigid arch of his neck relaxes by degrees. His ears swivel from their fixed forward position to resume their normal scanning of the world around him. Steam rises from his coat, where sweat meets the cooling evening air, and he shakes himself once, a full-body tremor that seems to cast off the last remnants of battle readiness. The mares approach him first, as they always do after such encounters. Not the bold, confident approach of normal times, but the careful, respectful advance of those who understand they have witnessed something significant. The lead mare reaches him first, extending her muzzle to touch his neck in a gesture that speaks of gratitude and recognition. One by one, the others follow, each offering their own silent acknowledgement of what he has done for them. You find yourself drawn into this ritual, moving closer until you too can breathe in his familiar scent, now mixed with the sharp smell of exertion and the fading traces of adrenaline. There is comfort in his solidity, in the steady rhythm of his breathing, as it gradually slows to normal. His presence has always meant safety, but now that safety feels newly earned, freshly proven. The foals, who pressed so close to their mothers during the confrontation, begin to venture out again. Their curiosity overcomes their caution as they investigate this adult, whose smell has changed, whose energy feels different than it did this morning. They approach in the sideways manner of the young, pretending to graze while actually moving steadily closer, until one brave youngster dares to touch his muzzle to the stallion's shoulder. Finding nothing threatening in this contact, the others quickly follow suit. As the sun begins its descent toward the western horizon, the light takes on that particular quality that marks the approach of evening. Longer shadows stretch across the grassland, and everything seems to glow from within, as if the very air has been infused with honey. The grass tips catch and hold this golden light, creating an ocean of gentle radiance that shifts and shimmers with every breath of wind. Your stallion moves away from the gathered family, not far, but enough to signal that the immediate crisis has passed and normal life can resume. He drops his head to graze, but even now his vigilance continues. His ears maintain their constant rotation, one always listening forward while the other monitors the space behind. The contest is over, but the responsibility never ends. You follow his lead, lowering your own head to the sweet evening grass. The blades are different now than they were in the harsh light of midday, softer somehow, more tender. The dew has begun to form, tiny droplets that burst on your tongue, with the concentrated essence of growing things. Each mouthful brings not just nourishment, but a kind of peace, the simple satisfaction of hunger being gently satisfied. Around you, the herd settles into the familiar rhythms of evening grazing. The steady sound of teeth against grass creates a backdrop of contentment, punctuated by the occasional soft snort or the whisper of hooves shifting position. The yearlings, their nervous energy finally finding an outlet, engage in brief games of tag, racing short distances before returning to graze beside their elders. Their playfulness seems especially bright against the backdrop of the earlier tension, a reminder that life continues, that joy persists even in a world where strength must sometimes be tested. The insects begin their evening chorus as the temperature cools. Crickets call from hidden places in the grass, their songs joining the deeper drone of beetles and the high whine of the first mosquitoes venturing out for their nightly hunt. These sounds have accompanied your evenings for as long as you can remember, a familiar symphony that speaks of summer's abundance and the reliable cycle of day into night. A red-winged blackbird perches on a nearby fence post, its scarlet shoulder patches brilliant against its dark feathers. It calls once, a liquid note that seems to celebrate the peaceful scene spread before it. Other birds join in, the soft cooing of morning doves, the sharp cry of a hawk high overhead, the chattering of sparrows as they settle into their evening roosts. The world is full of voices, each adding its own note to the growing song of dusk. Your stomach works steadily, processing the day's intake of grass and water. The sound is subtle but constant, a gentle rumbling that speaks of digestion, of nutrients being absorbed, of energy being stored for tomorrow's needs. It's a comforting sound, this evidence of your body's quiet efficiency, its ability to transform simple grass into the strength and stamina that carry you through each day. A mare approaches, one whose foal was born late in the spring and still shows the awkward proportions of the very young. She settles beside you to graze, a companionable presence that requires no acknowledgement beyond your peaceful coexistence. Her foal, braver now that his mother has indicated the all-clear, ventures close enough to investigate your scent before bounding away on legs that seem too long for his body. The mutual grooming begins spontaneously, as it always does in these quiet moments. The mare beside you turns to nibble gently at your shoulder, working her teeth through your coat to find the spots that itch, the places you cannot reach yourself. You return the favor, reaching across to scratch behind her ears in the way that makes her eyes half close with pleasure. These moments of physical connection are more than just practical grooming. They are the threads that weave the social fabric of your world. As the sun drops lower, The shadows grow longer, stretching across the grassland like fingers reaching toward the approaching night. The temperature begins its gradual descent, not yet cool but carrying the promise of the refreshing darkness to come. Your coat, still warm from the day's heat, will soon provide the perfect insulation against the night air. The stallion lifts his head from time to time, scanning the horizon with the automatic vigilance that never truly ends, but his posture remains relaxed, his movements unhurried. The challenge has been met and answered. The family remains intact. The territory holds secure. In this moment, in this golden light, in this patch of quiet carved out of an often turbulent world, all is as it should be. The grass continues to grow beneath your feet, the earth continues its ancient rotation, and you continue the timeless rhythm of grazing, resting, being present in this moment that holds within it all the peace the world has to offer. The evening stretches ahead, full of promise, and the deep satisfaction that comes from knowing your place in the grand scheme of things. Night-field constellations. The moon rises like a silver coin tossed into the darkening sky, its light pale and clean against the deepening blue of twilight. You lift your head from the grass to watch its ascent, feeling something ancient stir in your bones at the sight. This is the same moon that has watched over countless generations of your kind, the same gentle guardian that has overseen the long nights of your ancestors stretching back to the beginning of time. The transition from day to night happens gradually, almost imperceptibly, like the slow turning of a great wheel. The golden light of evening fades to amber, then to deep orange, then to the rich purple that marks the true beginning of darkness. Stars begin to appear, first one, then another. Then suddenly the sky is full of them, tiny points of light scattered across the vast dome above like seeds thrown by an invisible hand. Your herd has settled into the rhythms of night, but these are different from the rhythms of day. There is no complete rest here, no abandonment to sleep as humans know it. Instead, there is a careful balance between vigilance and repose, a system of shared responsibility that has kept your kind alive through millennia of darkness and the dangers it might bring. The stallion takes the first watch, as he always does. His head remains high, ears constantly moving to catch the slightest sound that might signal trouble. His eyes scan the silvered landscape, noting every shadow, every movement of grass in the night breeze. The moon's light transforms the familiar grassland into something strange and beautiful, painting everything in shades of silver and black that exist nowhere in the daylight world. You doze standing, as horses have learned to do, your weight balanced perfectly on legs that remain locked in position even as your mind drifts towards sleep. It's a skill that takes time to master, this ability to rest while remaining ready to run at a moment's notice. Your head drops low, your breathing slows, but some part of you remains alert, connected to the network of awareness that extends throughout the herd. The sounds of night are different from those of day. The cheerful calls of meadowlarks and the busy chatter of sparrows give way to the haunting call of an owl somewhere in the distance. Its voice carries across the grassland like a question being asked of the darkness, and after a moment, another owl answers from a different direction. Their conversation continues, a dialogue conducted in notes that seem to emerge from the very essence of night itself. Somewhere far off, a coyote yips, the sound wild and lonely in the vast space. Others join in, their voices weaving together in a chorus that speaks of moonlight and hunting, and the fierce joy of being alive under the stars. The sound makes your skin twitch slightly, not from fear but from the ancient recognition of wildness calling to wildness. These are not your enemies, these singers in the darkness, but they are reminders that the night belongs to more than just your peaceful herd. The stallion's ears flick toward the coyote song, monitoring its distance and direction. His body language remains calm, indicating that the pack is far enough away to pose no immediate threat. Still, he files the information away, adding it to the mental map he maintains of everything that moves within his territory. Knowledge is survival, and survival is the first responsibility of leadership. As the night deepens, the watch shifts. The lead mare lifts her head, shaking off the light doze that has refreshed her for the hours ahead. The stallion, sensing her alertness, allows his own vigilance to relax slightly. Not enough to sleep deeply, but enough to rest muscles that have been tense with responsibility since the sun set. This is how the night passes, in a careful choreography of shared duty that ensures someone is always watching, always listening, always ready. You find yourself entering that strange state between sleeping and waking that horses know so well. Your body rests, your legs remain steady, but your mind drifts into landscapes that exist only in dreams. You run across endless grasslands under skies that shift and change with every stride. You graze in meadows where the grass never ends and the water runs clear and cold. You stand beside other horses, some familiar, some unknown, all part of the great continuum of your kind. The dream running feels so real that your legs twitch slightly in response to the imagined movement. Your breathing quickens as if you were actually galloping across those infinite plains. But even in sleep, some part of you remains anchored to the waking world, ready to surface instantly if danger threatens. A shooting star streaks across the sky, a brief silver scratch against the darkness that appears and vanishes in the space of a heartbeat. You catch it at the edge of your vision, that sudden movement that makes your head lift slightly before you realize what you've seen. The star is gone, but its passage seems to leave something behind, a sense of vastness and possibility that makes the night feel suddenly larger than before. The constellations wheel slowly overhead, following their ancient paths across the sky. You don't know their names, but you know their presence, the comfort of their familiar patterns marking the passage of time. The Great Bear walks his eternal circle. The swan spreads her wings across the river of stars. The hunter rises in the east with his belt of 3 bright jewels. These are the same stars that guided your ancestors, the same lights that will shine long after you have returned to the earth that sustains you. The temperature drops as the night progresses, the heat of the day radiating up from the earth and dissipating into the clear sky. Your coat, which seemed almost too warm in the afternoon sun, now provides perfect insulation against the cool air. You shift slightly, adjusting your position to take advantage of the warmth generated by the other horses nearby. Body heat shared is body heat conserved, another lesson learned over countless generations. An owl calls again, closer this time, and you catch the whisper of wings as it passes overhead on a hunting flight. The mouse or vole it seeks has no idea that death approaches on silent feathers, no knowledge that its small life hangs in the balance of the owl's accuracy and speed. This is the way of the night world, where hunters and hunted play out their eternal drama under the watchful eyes of the stars. The mare on watch duty shifts her position, moving a few steps to get a better view of a shadow that has caught her attention. Her movement ripples through the herd, causing heads to lift and ears to swivel in her direction. After a moment of careful observation, she relaxes, and the tension flows out of the group like water from a broken dam. It was nothing, just a trick of moonlight and shadow, but the response was automatic and immediate. In the darkness, vigilance is the price of survival. As the night wears on, you find yourself settling deeper into the peaceful rhythm of shared rest. The coyotes have moved on, their voices fading to silence. The owls continue their hunting, but their calls grow more distant. The world settles into the deep quiet that belongs to the small hours, when even the wind seems to hold its breath, and the only sounds are the gentle ones of grass growing and hearts beating, and the earth turning slowly beneath the patient stars. The moon climbs higher, smaller now but brighter, casting sharp shadows that define every blade of grass, every curve of sleeping horse, every fold in the landscape. In this silver light, the world takes on an otherworldly beauty that exists only in the deep hours of night, when the boundary between dream and waking grows thin and anything seems possible. This is your time, these quiet hours when consciousness becomes fluid and the ancient memories stored in blood and bone rise close to the surface. You are not just yourself in these moments, but part of something larger, something that connects you to every horse that has ever stood under these same stars, breathing this same air, finding comfort in the presence of their own kind, while the night flows around them like a gentle river. Dry weeks of summer. The grass tells the story before your eyes do. What was once emerald and lush now stands brittle and brown, crackling beneath your hooves like paper left too long in the sun. Each blade has surrendered its moisture to the relentless heat, transforming from living green to something that resembles straw more than the sweet fodder that sustained you through the abundant weeks of early summer. The change crept in slowly at first, so gradually that you hardly noticed. A slight dulling of color here, a dryness of texture there. But summer has a way of accelerating its own harshness, and what began as subtle shifts has become undeniable reality. The earth beneath your feet has hardened, cracking into geometric patterns that speak of moisture drawn deep underground, beyond the reach of roots and rain. Your nostrils flare constantly now, seeking traces of water in air that seems to have forgotten what humidity feels like. The scents that reach you are sharp and dusty, the smell of dried earth and withered vegetation replacing the rich, loamy fragrances of wet soil and growing things. Even your own scent has changed, carrying the metallic tang of a body working harder to maintain its internal balance against the demands of heat and scarcity. The creek that provided such easy refreshment in the spring months has shrunk to a series of scattered pools connected by the thinnest trickle of water. The banks that once supported cattails and wild iris now show white salt deposits where the water line has retreated. The mud at the edges has baked into concrete-hard ridges that preserve the hoofprints of desperate animals who came seeking relief and found only the memory of abundance. Each morning brings the same crushing weight of heat that builds throughout the day like a furnace being steadily stoked. The sun rises with an intensity that seems personal, as if it has singled out this particular patch of earth for special attention. By midday, the air shimmers with heat waves that make the horizon dance and blur, creating mirages of water where none exists. The herd's behavior has adapted to this new reality, with the fluid intelligence that has kept your kind alive through countless seasons of plenty and want. The frantic grazing of dawn and dusk has replaced the leisurely browsing of cooler months. You wake before sunrise to take advantage of the brief period when the grass still holds traces of dew, when the air carries some memory of the night's coolness. The midday hours are spent in whatever shade can be found, standing motionless to conserve energy while your body processes the meager nutrition gleaned from increasingly poor forage. Even the insects have changed their patterns. The lazy buzz of afternoon flies has given way to clouds of aggressive gnats that seek the moisture in your eyes and nostrils. They cluster around any hint of dampness, turning the simple act of breathing into a constant battle against tiny invaders. Your tail never stops moving now, a constant metronome of defense against pests that have grown bold in their own desperation. The stallion's restlessness grows more pronounced each day. His head lifts more frequently from the sparse grazing, his gaze sweeping the horizon with an intensity that speaks of calculations being made, decisions being weighed. You can see the knowledge in his eyes, the understanding that this situation cannot continue indefinitely. The grass will not magically green itself, the water will not spontaneously return to the creek, and the herd cannot survive on hope alone. The mares feel it too, this building tension that has nothing to do with immediate danger and everything to do with the slow-burning crisis of diminishing resources. Their movements have become more economical, their interactions more focused. The playful nipping and mutual grooming that marked easier times has given way to a kind of quiet efficiency, as if everyone understands that energy is now a precious commodity not to be wasted on frivolous pursuits. The foals suffer most visibly from the changed conditions. Their mother's milk, once rich and abundant, now comes harder and in smaller quantities as the mares struggle to maintain their own condition on increasingly poor feed. The youngsters' ribs show more prominently beneath their dull coats, and their usual exuberance has been replaced by a listless acceptance that seems heartbreaking in creatures so young. Water has become the organizing principle around which all life revolves. The twice-daily migrations to the shrinking creek have taken on the solemnity of religious ritual. Each horse drinks deeply when their turn comes, knowing that the next opportunity may be many hours away. The weaker members of the herd are given priority access, a social arrangement that speaks to values deeper than mere survival of the fittest. The dust is everywhere now, a fine powder that coats everything and everyone. It clings to your coat, turning its natural color into something muted and uniform. It fills your nostrils with each breath, gritty and dry against the sensitive membranes. It turns the simple act of rolling, once a pleasure, into a necessity for dislodging the layers of particles that accumulate on your skin. At night, when the temperature finally drops enough to allow for real rest, you can hear the earth itself creaking and sighing as it contracts from the day's heat. Small sounds echo across the hardpan, the crack of settling soil, the rustle of wind through grass too dry to bend gracefully. Even the familiar night sounds seem muted, as if the very air has become too thin to carry them properly. The stallion's decision, when it finally comes, arrives not as a dramatic moment, but as a quiet certainty that settles over the herd like morning mist. You see it in the way he positions himself, facing south toward the distant mountains where instinct tells him water and grass might still be found. You see it in the way the lead mare moves to stand beside him, her own gaze following his toward the horizon. You see it in the subtle shift of energy that runs through the group as each member recognizes that change is coming, that the time for waiting has passed. The preparation is mostly mental, a collective acceptance that comfort and familiarity must be abandoned in favor of survival. There are no possessions to pack, no arrangements to make beyond the simple recognition that what lies ahead will be different from what lies behind. The territory that has been home for months will be surrendered to the dust and heat, left for whatever creatures can still find sustenance in its depleted offerings. As another dawn breaks over the parched landscape, painting the brown grass gold in the early light, you feel the stirring of ancient instincts that your ancestors have passed down through generations beyond counting. The urge to move, to seek, to follow the promise of better conditions somewhere beyond the visible horizon. It's a feeling that goes deeper than conscious thought, a cellular knowledge that survival sometimes requires the courage to abandon the known for the unknown. The dust swirls around your hooves as you shift your weight, ready for whatever comes next. The sun climbs higher, promising another day of relentless heat, but today will be different. Today, the journey begins. Today, you trust in the wisdom of movement, in the ancient faith that somewhere ahead lies the green grass and clear water that will restore your world to abundance. The decision has been made. The exodus is about to begin. Miles of migration. The first step is always the hardest, that initial break from the familiar that requires an act of faith as much as physical movement. Your hoof lifts from the cracked earth that has been home for so many months, hovers for a moment in the space between staying and going, then settles onto new ground a stride away. The sound it makes is different somehow, carrying the weight of decision, the commitment to a path that leads into the unknown. The stallion moves with purpose now, his earlier restlessness transformed into focused determination. Each step he takes is deliberate, chosen, part of a route that exists more in instinct than conscious planning. His head remains high, ears forward, reading the landscape ahead for signs of promise or peril. Behind him, the herd follows in the loose formation that has served your kind for millennia, close enough for mutual support but spread wide enough to avoid the dust kicked up by too many hooves in too small a space. The rhythm begins almost immediately, that ancient cadence of hoof against earth that becomes both heartbeat and timekeeper for the journey ahead. 4 beats, then 4 more, then 4 again, the pattern hypnotic in its repetition yet somehow never monotonous. Each footfall connects you to the earth, to the ground that supports and guides you, to the very planet that turns beneath your traveling feet. The landscape changes so gradually that you hardly notice at first. The familiar landmarks of your former territory disappear behind you one by one, replaced by terrain that grows increasingly foreign with each mile. The dried creek bed that marked your eastern boundary becomes a memory, then a thin line, then disappears entirely into the heat haze that shimmers behind you. You are committed now, fully embarked on this journey with no easy way to return. The sun climbs higher as the morning progresses, its heat beginning to build that familiar pressure that will soon become oppressive. But there is purpose in your movement now, a sense of progress that makes the discomfort bearable. Each step carries you closer to the possibility of relief, to the promise of green grass and flowing water that pulls you forward like a magnet draws iron. Your muscles settle into the work of sustained travel, finding their rhythm as systems that have been largely inactive during the long months of stationary grazing come back online. The large muscles of your hindquarters generate the power that drives you forward, while the smaller stabilizing muscles along your back and sides make the constant adjustments necessary to maintain balance across uneven ground. Your breathing deepens to supply the oxygen this effort demands, but it remains steady, controlled, the respiration of an athlete designed for endurance rather than speed. The tendons in your legs stretch and contract with each stride, storing and releasing energy like biological springs that make locomotion more efficient than it has any right to be. The bones of your feet strike the ground with precision, each impact carefully controlled by joints and ligaments that have evolved over millions of years to absorb shock and distribute weight. You are a marvel of engineering, perfectly adapted for exactly this kind of sustained movement across varied terrain. The other horses spread out around you, each finding their own optimal position within the loose formation. The lead mare travels slightly ahead and to the side of the stallion, her own experience and judgment serving as a check on his decisions. The mothers with foals cluster toward the center of the group, their youngsters protected by the bodies of stronger adults. The yearlings and unmated mares range wider, their relative freedom from responsibility allowing them to scout the flanks and serve as early warning systems for potential threats. Miles pass beneath your hooves, each one marked by subtle changes in the landscape that only become apparent when you stop to rest and look back at the distance covered. The rolling hills that seemed so prominent from your old territory now appear as gentle swells in the earth, perspective flattening them into mere undulations. The tree line that once marked the far edge of your world has become a distant smudge, then a memory, then nothing at all. The dust becomes a constant companion, rising from the impact of so many hooves and hanging in the still air like a fine brown curtain. It coats your nostrils, making each breath a reminder of the dry conditions that drove you to this journey in the first place. But dust also serves a purpose, creating a visible marker of your passage, a trail that could be followed by others of your kind who might be making their own desperate migrations in search of better conditions. The heat builds steadily as the sun reaches its zenith, transforming the air into something thick and oppressive that seems to press down on your back like a physical weight. But you continue moving, driven by the knowledge that stopping now would mean enduring the worst of the day's heat without the benefit of progress. Better to push through, to use the discomfort as fuel for the journey, rather than allow it to become a reason for delay. Your shadow shrinks beneath you as the sun climbs higher, until it becomes little more than a dark pool directly under your belly. The light grows harsh and white, bleaching color from the landscape and making everything appear flat and overexposed. Heat waves begin to rise from the earth, creating a shimmering distortion that makes the horizon dance and waver like water disturbed by wind. The rhythm of travel becomes meditative, each step a repetition of the one before, each mile a variation on the theme of forward progress. Your mind begins to drift, not into sleep, but into a kind of walking trance that allows the miles to pass without the grinding awareness of effort that would make the journey unbearable. You exist in the present moment of each footfall, while simultaneously being carried forward by the accumulated momentum of all the footfalls that came before. Water becomes a constant thought, not an obsession, but a steady undercurrent of awareness that influences every decision. The memory of the last drink grows more precious with each passing hour, while the promise of the next one pulls you forward with increasing urgency. Your body's systems begin to make their own calculations, conserving moisture, reducing unnecessary functions, preparing for the possibility that relief may still be many miles away. The landscape ahead begins to show the first subtle signs of change, hints that the conditions driving your migration may be less severe in the distance. The grass, while still brown and dry, seems less brittle, less completely desiccated. The earth beneath your feet shows traces of moisture deeper down, where the cracks in the hardpan reveal dark soil that has not yet surrendered all its water to the relentless sun. As the afternoon wears on, the heat becomes a living thing, a presence that surrounds and penetrates everything. Your coat becomes slick with sweat, your breathing grows deeper and more deliberate, and every step requires a conscious effort to overcome the body's natural desire to stop and seek shade. But the herd moves as one, each individual drawing strength from the others, the collective will to survive overriding any single animal's impulse to surrender to the heat. The prairie stretches endlessly ahead, a vast canvas of brown and gold that seems to extend beyond the curve of the earth itself. But you have learned to read the subtle signs that indicate change is coming, the almost imperceptible shift in the quality of light that suggests different conditions ahead. The air carries scents that speak of grass that has known more recent rain, of earth that has not yet forgotten the touch of moisture. Miles blur together in the heat, each one a small victory against the forces that would keep you trapped in the land of scarcity. Your hooves strike the earth with steady persistence, writing your story across the landscape one step at a time. The rhythm never stops, the progress never ceases, and with each mile you move closer to the promise of renewal that lies somewhere beyond the shimmering horizon. The journey has become your world now, the steady progression across the prairie, a complete universe of sensation and effort and hope. Behind you lies the familiar territory of drought and want. Ahead lies the unknown promise of better conditions. And here, in the eternal present of movement, you exist in the pure act of traveling toward whatever tomorrow might bring. Autumn gold, abundance. The valley opens before us like a promise kept by the earth itself. Where summer's harsh sun once baked the ground to dust and stubble, now golden grasses wave in cool currents of air that carry the smell of change. My hooves sink slightly into soil that has drunk deeply from recent rains, and with each step comes the satisfying give of earth that remembers water. The grass here grows thick and sweet, heavy with seed heads that brush against my chest as I move through this abundance. Each mouthful brings flavors that summer's sparse pickings could never offer. The nutty richness of mature seeds, the lingering sweetness of stems that have concentrated their sugars against the coming cold. My teeth work steadily, grinding the bounty that will build the fat reserves I'll need when snow covers this feast. Around me, the herd spreads out in contentment. There's no urgency in our grazing now, no need to compete for the choicest patches. The valley provides enough for all of us, and we move with the slow satisfaction of those who know abundance. Mares call softly to their foals, voices carrying farther in the crisp air. The stallion lifts his head periodically, not from alarm but from simple pleasure at surveying his domain in this season of plenty. The air itself feels different against my coat. Where summer brought weight and stillness, autumn's breath moves with purpose. It carries scents from distant places, the smoke of leaves burning somewhere beyond the ridges, the green smell of rushing water, the promise of storms still gathering strength in far mountains. My nostrils flare wide to catch every message the wind brings, and my body responds with ancient knowledge. Already, I can feel the changes beginning beneath my skin. The summer coat that served me well in heat now loosens, making way for something thicker. New hairs push through, darker and denser than what they replace. When I rub against the rough bark of cottonwoods, whole patches of old hair come away, clinging to the bark like offerings to the season's change. The new growth itches pleasantly, and I find myself seeking out every scratching post the valley offers. My appetite has changed too. Where summer brought careful rationing of energy, autumn demands accumulation. I graze longer into the evening, my stomach expanding to accommodate more grass than I would have eaten in the lean months. The sweetness of these mature plants satisfies something deep in my body's wisdom, triggering the ancient preparation for harder times ahead. Fat builds along my ribs, padding that will serve as both insulation and fuel when winter strips the valley bare. The light itself has grown richer, golden in a way that summer's white glare never achieved. It slants through the cottonwood leaves at angles that warm my back more gently, inviting longer sessions of sunbathing on protected slopes. When clouds pass overhead, their shadows bring coolness that refreshes rather than threatens. Even the quality of darkness has changed. Nights come earlier but bring star-filled skies so clear they seem to pulse with cold fire. Water tastes different now too. The stream that winds through the valley's heart runs cold and quick, fed by rains that have washed the dust from distant stones. Each drink sends a chill through my teeth that wakes something primal in my chest. My body knows this taste, knows it speaks of seasons turning, of preparation time growing short. The other members of our band show their own responses to autumn's call. Coats grow thicker on every back, and bellies round with the urgent feeding that marks this season. The older mares move with the careful deliberation of those who have weathered many winters, while younger horses seem almost surprised by their bodies' demands for constant grazing. Foals still nurse but begin to sample the rich grasses with growing interest, their mothers patient with these first lessons in seasonal survival. Even our rest changes character. Where summer naps came in whatever shade we could find, autumn sleep seeks the warm pockets where sun-heated stone radiates comfort into cool air. We gather closer during these resting periods, not yet driven together by cold, but drawn by the comfort of proximity as temperatures begin their slow decline toward winter's grip. The sounds of the valley speak of abundance too. Grass rustles differently when heavy with seed, creating whispered music as we move through it. Birds call with different urgency, their voices carrying news of migration soon to come. Even the wind through changing leaves brings new harmonies, a counterpoint to summer's harsh emptiness. This is the season of preparation disguised as plenty, and my body responds to its call with genetic memory stretching back through countless generations of horses who learned to read autumn's signs and prepare accordingly. The abundance surrounding us now is not mere luxury, it is fuel for survival, beauty mixed inextricably with necessity. The first frost. Dawn arrives wrapped in silver silence, and I wake to a world transformed by night's quiet artistry. Each blade of grass wears a crystal crown, and my breath emerges in small clouds that dissipate slowly in the still air. The change has come while we slept, winter's first gentle warning painted across everything the light can touch. My whiskers tingle with accumulated frost, tiny ice crystals that have formed from the moisture of my own breathing during the night. When I shake my head, they scatter like diamond dust, catching the early light before melting into nothing. The sensation is strange but not unpleasant, a reminder that my body continues its work even in sleep, warming the air around my muzzle enough to create these delicate decorations. The ground beneath my hooves has hardened overnight. Where yesterday brought the soft give of earth still holding summer's warmth, now the soil rings with a different note when struck. Not yet the iron hardness of deep winter, but something more solid, more resistant. Each step sends small vibrations up through my bones, and I find myself placing my feet with greater care, testing the new firmness before committing my full weight. Around me, the herd stirs slowly, bodies reluctant to leave the warmth we've shared through the dark hours. Steam rises from every back where body heat meets cold air, creating small personal clouds that mark each of us like spirits made visible. The mares shift carefully, shaking frost from their manes before lifting heads to test the air. Even the stallion moves with less urgency than summer mornings demanded, his movements deliberate and energy-conserving. Grazing becomes a different enterprise now. The grass crunches beneath my teeth, each blade brittle with cold until body heat softens it enough to chew properly. The flavors have changed too. Frost has concentrated some tastes while muting others, creating combinations that speak of seasons balancing on the edge of transformation. My jaw works harder against the increased resistance, but the effort warms the muscles of my head and neck in ways that feel good against the morning chill. The sun, when it finally clears the eastern ridges, brings a different quality of warmth than autumn's earlier offerings. Its rays slant low and golden, finding the frost-covered grasses and setting the whole valley ablaze with light that seems to burn without heat. I turn my body to catch these first warm touches, angling my dark coat toward the promise of comfort that will come as the day progresses. Water has become a more complex negotiation. The stream still runs free, but ice forms at its edges during the night, creating crystal margins that tinkle when broken by careless hooves. The water itself shocks my muzzle with cold that makes my teeth ache, yet my body craves it with an intensity that surprises me. Each drink sends shivers through my throat, but the thirst that follows frost-covered grazing demands satisfaction regardless of temperature. My body's internal rhythms shift to match this new reality. Where summer brought early rising and long days of activity, frost mornings invite patience. Energy becomes a resource to be managed rather than freely spent. I find myself seeking sheltered spots where rocks or trees have captured yesterday's warmth and release it slowly into the cold air. These warm pockets become gathering places where several of us will stand, sharing heat and comfort while we wait for the sun to climb high enough to matter. The herd's behavior changes subtly but unmistakably. We graze closer together now, not from fear but from an instinctive understanding that proximity conserves warmth. The foals stay nearer to their mothers, learning without instruction that cold mornings reward closeness. Even our movements become more economical. Fewer random explorations, more purposeful progression from shelter to food, to water, and back to shelter. Wind carries different messages now. Where autumn breezes brought the pleasant coolness of change, these morning currents slice through my coat with edges that speak of serious cold to come. I turn my hindquarters toward the worst of it, presenting my rounded rump to deflect the worst, while my head stays oriented toward whatever grazing the frost-shortened day might offer. The very air seems thinner, clearer, as if cold has purified it of summer's heaviness. Sounds carry differently, hoofbeats ring more sharply, voices travel farther. Even the rustle of movement through grass takes on a crystalline quality that summer never achieved. My ears swivel constantly, reading the enhanced acoustics of this transformed world. Sleep patterns adjust without conscious decision. Where summer invited afternoon naps in whatever shade could be found, frost-touched days demand rest during the warmest hours, when sun has climbed high enough to provide real comfort. We gather in sunny spots that offer both warmth and protection from wind, bodies arranged to share heat while eyes remain alert for any sign of threat or opportunity. Even my appetite responds to frost's arrival. The urgency of autumn feeding continues, but with new complexity. My body craves not just calories but the specific nutrients that will build the kind of fat and muscle that insulates effectively. I find myself drawn to certain grasses over others, following instincts that have guided generations of horses through the transition from abundance to survival. The frost melts as morning progresses, but its lesson remains written in the changed behavior of every creature in the valley. We have crossed a threshold, entered the season when cold becomes a daily negotiation rather than an occasional visitor. My thick coat grows thicker still, my body preparing for tests that frost's gentle warning only hints at. Snow-deep silence. The storm arrives without fanfare, erasing the world one flake at a time until everything familiar disappears beneath a blanket that transforms the valley into something ancient and unrecognizable. What began as scattered crystals dancing on morning wind has become a wall of white that swallows sight and sound, reducing existence to the small sphere of warmth around my body and the steady rhythm of breath that keeps life flowing through the cold. Snow builds on my back in layers that tell the story of the storm's progression. First came the fine powder that settled into my coat like dust, melting instantly against skin still warm from movement. Then larger flakes that clung longer before succumbing to body heat, creating brief moments of wetness that dried quickly in the cold air. Now the snow falls thick and heavy, accumulating faster than my warmth can defeat it, building a growing mantle that both insulates and burdens. My breath becomes visible architecture in the frigid air, each exhalation creating clouds that hang for precious moments before dissipating into the surrounding whiteness. The rhythm of breathing takes on new importance, not just the automatic exchange of air, but a source of warmth that radiates outward from my nostrils and mouth. I find myself timing breaths to maximize the comfort these small heat sources provide, letting each cloud linger against my muzzle before the wind steals it away. Walking through deepening snow requires new strategies learned from ancestral memory buried in bone and muscle. My hooves break through the crusted surface with sounds that seem impossibly loud in the muffled world, sharp cracks followed by the softer compression of powder beneath. Each step demands effort as I lift my legs high enough to clear the accumulation, then punch down through resistance that grows stronger with every inch of new fall. The herd draws together not through conscious decision but through the inexorable pull of shared warmth. We form a loose cluster that shifts and breathes like a single organism, individuals moving in and out of the protective center while maintaining the overall cohesion that keeps us all alive. The stallion positions himself on the windward side, his larger body serving as a brake against the worst of the driving snow, while mares and younger horses find shelter in his lee. Steam rises from our grouped bodies, creating a microclimate that defies the storm's attempt to steal all warmth from the world. Where multiple backs press close together, the snow melts and refreezes, forming a complex geography of ice and slush that speaks of the battle between life heat and winter's hunger. I press against the warm flank of the mare beside me, feeling her solid presence through layers of winter coat that have grown thick enough to blur the boundaries between individuals. Grazing becomes an archaeological expedition, each potential bite buried beneath snow that must be swept away with muzzle and hoof before frozen grass can be reached. The effort required often exceeds the calories gained, but the body's demands for fuel continue regardless of accessibility. I learned to read the subtle variations in snow depth that indicate where wind has scoured patches thin enough to make the excavation worthwhile. The world's sounds change completely under snow's influence. Footsteps that once rang clear against hard ground now make soft, muffled impressions that seem to swallow themselves. Voices carry differently too, some frequencies absorbed by the falling snow while others cut through with startling clarity. The usual background symphony of wind through grass disappears entirely, replaced by the whisper of countless flakes settling on surfaces that have already surrendered to winter's advance. Cold penetrates through my thick coat in ways that surprise me with their variety. Sometimes it comes as sharp needles driven by wind that finds the gaps between hairs and drives straight to skin. Other times it seeps gradually, a slow theft of warmth that begins at extremities and works inward until even the core of my body must work harder to maintain its essential heat. My ears become particularly vulnerable, the thin skin there conducting cold with an efficiency that makes me shake my head frequently to restore circulation. The snow beneath our hooves develops its own complex character as the storm progresses. What started as soft powder compresses under our weight into something denser, more resistant. In places where we've gathered repeatedly, it forms a packed surface that provides better footing but reflects cold upward with increased intensity. Where the wind sculpts drifts, the snow develops a crust that sometimes supports weight and sometimes gives way with startling suddenness, plunging a hoof into the softer accumulation beneath. Night and day blur together during the storm's peak intensity. The usual signals of sun's passage become meaningless when everything exists in the same grey-white twilight. Time becomes measured not by light but by the gradual deepening of snow, the increasing effort required for movement, the growing urgency of staying close to the life-giving warmth of the herd. Sleep comes in brief intervals, standing rest that allows just enough recovery to continue the essential work of staying warm and alive. Hunger changes character when every calorie burned in search of food must be weighed against the energy cost of the search itself. I learned to identify the wind patterns that reveal where sparse vegetation might still be accessible, following air currents that carry the faint scent of grass not yet completely buried. When food is found, it becomes precious beyond its nutritional value, a small victory against winter's siege that reminds the body that survival remains possible. The storm's intensity fluctuates like a living thing, sometimes easing enough to reveal glimpses of familiar landmarks transformed beyond recognition, then returning with renewed fury that erases these brief moments of orientation. During these lulls, the herd takes advantage to shift position, seeking better shelter or more accessible grazing, moving with the coordinated purpose of those who understand that such opportunities may not come again soon. My body adapts to this new reality, with changes that happen too gradually to notice until they're complete. Muscles learn to generate heat more efficiently, blood flow adjusts to keep extremities functional while protecting the vital core. Even breathing modifies to warm incoming air more effectively before it reaches delicate lung tissue. These adjustments happen without conscious effort, genetic programming activated by conditions that my ancestors knew well. When the wind finally begins to ease and the falling snow thins to scattered flakes, the silence that follows seems profound beyond description. The world has been remade in white, familiar contours buried beneath accumulations that will shape movement and behavior until spring's distant promise returns to reclaim the valley. Spring's tiny hooves. The first foal arrives with dawn, sliding into the world on legs that seem impossibly long and fragile, wet coats steaming in the cool morning air. I watch from a respectful distance as the mare cleans her offspring with rough tongue strokes that serve both to dry and to imprint the scent that will bind them together through all the seasons to come. The tiny creature struggles to coordinate limbs that appear to have no understanding of their purpose, folding and unfolding like some elaborate puzzle being solved through pure determination. Within the hour, those uncertain legs find their purpose, and the foal stands for the first time, swaying like a reed in wind but unmistakably upright. The mare nickers soft encouragement, her voice carrying notes I've never heard from her before, sounds that speak of ancient promises and protective instincts awakened by this small miracle of spring. The foal's answering whinny is high and thin, a sound that cuts through the morning air with surprising clarity despite its fragility. More foals follow in the days that pass, each arrival marking another victory over winter's harsh testing. The valley fills with the sounds of new life, the splash of tiny hooves through shallow stream crossings, the rustle of small bodies exploring grass that reaches nearly to their bellies, the constant conversation between mothers and offspring that creates a continuous backdrop of gentle communication. Each foal brings its own personality into the world, some bold enough to venture far from protective flanks, others content to shadow their mothers with careful steps that never stray beyond immediate reach. My role in this spring awakening shifts without conscious decision from simple herd member to guardian of the vulnerable. The stallion carries the primary responsibility for protection, but every adult in our band shares the instinctive understanding that these small lives represent our future, our genetic investment in seasons yet to come. I find myself positioned automatically to create barriers between foals and potential threats, my body responding to movements and sounds that might indicate danger with an alertness that surprises me with its intensity. The foals learn the rules of survival through play that looks carefree but serves deadly serious purposes. They chase each other through the grass in games that teach speed and agility, their delighted squeals masking the development of muscles and reflexes that may someday mean the difference between life and death. When they rear up on hind legs in mock combat, they're rehearsing behaviors that will serve them well in future conflicts. Every game contains lessons essential to their eventual independence. Teaching happens through demonstration rather than instruction. When a foal ventures too far from the group, a mare's sharp call brings immediate attention, and the youngster learns to read the difference between casual communication and urgent warning. When stream crossings present challenges, foals watch carefully as adults navigate the safest routes, their keen eyes absorbing information about reading water depth and current strength that will serve them throughout their lives. The protective circle that forms around grazing foals happens without planning or discussion. Adults position themselves to create overlapping fields of vision that leave no approach unguarded, while still allowing the youngsters freedom to explore and learn. This arrangement shifts fluidly as the group moves, each adult adjusting position to maintain coverage while accommodating the unpredictable movements of curious offspring who haven't yet learned to fear the dangers that lurk beyond the safety of the herd. Nursing creates its own rhythms within the larger patterns of daily life. Mares must balance their own needs for nutrition and rest against the constant demands of offspring who seem to require milk at intervals that barely allow recovery between feedings. I watch the careful choreography of these interactions, foals approaching with eager anticipation, mares positioning themselves to accommodate nursing while maintaining awareness of surroundings, the satisfied quiet that follows successful feeding sessions. The foal's rapid growth amazes me daily. What seemed impossibly fragile just days ago now demonstrates surprising strength and coordination. Their legs, which initially appeared too long for effective control, now carry them across rough ground with increasing confidence. Their necks stretch higher each day, allowing them to reach grass that was previously beyond their capability. The awkward proportions of birth gradually resolve into the balanced geometry that will serve them as adults. Curiosity drives much of the foal's behavior, leading them to investigate everything within reach and many things that shouldn't be. They mouth rocks, leaves, and any object that catches their attention, learning through taste and texture what's useful and what should be avoided. Their mothers watch these explorations with patience born of understanding that such investigations are necessary parts of education, intervening only when genuine danger threatens. The bond between mare and foal strengthens through countless small interactions that build trust and communication. A mother's gentle nudge guides her offspring away from hazards, while her approving nicker rewards correct behavior. The foal learns to read subtle signals, the position of ears, the tension in muscles, the quality of breathing, that convey information about safety and danger more effectively than any verbal warning could achieve. Sleep patterns among the foals create additional challenges for the adults charged with their protection. Young horses sleep more deeply and for longer periods than their elders, requiring vigilance from guardians who must remain alert while their charges rest. The sight of foals collapsed in deep sleep, legs folded beneath them in positions that seem impossibly contorted, never fails to evoke protective instincts in every adult nearby. Weather presents constant tests for the young ones, who haven't yet developed the thick coats and fat reserves that help adults weather temperature fluctuations. Cold snaps send them pressing close to their mother's warm flanks, while hot days find them seeking shade they're still learning to recognize and evaluate. Rain creates particular challenges. Their lighter bodies chill more quickly, but their curiosity about the unusual precipitation often overrides their discomfort. The foals' voices change as they grow, high squeaks gradually deepening into sounds that hint at the adult calls they'll eventually master. They experiment with different vocalizations, testing their ability to communicate across distances and learning to distinguish between the various calls that adults use to convey different types of information. These early attempts at proper horse conversation often bring amused responses from adults who remember their own learning processes. As spring progresses, the foals begin to show individual preferences and personality traits that will define them throughout their lives. Some emerge as natural leaders, rallying their playmates for adventures that test boundaries and explore new territories. Others prove more cautious, preferring to observe and learn before committing to unfamiliar experiences. These early character traits fascinate me with their clarity and consistency. The marvel of watching completely helpless creatures transform into capable young horses within a few short months never loses its power to amaze. Each day brings visible progress, stronger legs, better coordination, increased confidence, growing independence. Yet they remain utterly dependent on adult protection and guidance, a paradox that defines the delicate balance of this season of renewal and hope. River crossing trial. The river that meandered gently through our valley all winter has transformed into something altogether more menacing, swollen with snowmelt from the high peaks until it churns with a voice that speaks of power and impatience. What was once a pleasant stream barely reaching my hocks has become a torrent that stretches nearly bank to bank, carrying debris torn from upstream reaches, broken branches, uprooted grasses, and foam that speaks of water moving too fast for its own comfort. The sound reaches us long before we arrive at the crossing, a continuous rumble that makes conversation difficult and sets the foals pressing closer to their mothers with instinctive unease. This is no longer the gentle babble of moving water over stones, but something more aggressive, the voice of winter's accumulated weight being released all at once, demanding passage to distant seas with an urgency that brooks no interference. At the water's edge, the herd gathers in nervous consultation, every head raised to assess this challenge that blocks our path to better grazing on the far bank. The stallion paces the muddy margin, testing different approaches while the current pulls at his hooves with insistent tugs that demonstrate its power even in the shallows. His ears flick constantly between the sound of rushing water and the anxious movements of his band, calculating risks with the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. The first step into the flow sends shockwaves through my nervous system as water cold enough to carry the memory of snow wraps around my cannon bones with a grip that seems to penetrate straight through hide and into bone itself. The current immediately begins its work, pushing against my legs with steady pressure that increases with every inch of depth. What appeared to be merely fast-moving water from the bank reveals itself as something far more complex and dangerous once engaged. Behind me, I hear the sharp intake of breath as the mare following experiences her own first contact with the frigid water. The foal's high-pitched whinnies express distress that their mothers answer with reassuring nicknames, though I can detect the underlying tension in voices that struggle to remain calm while dealing with very real danger. The protective instincts that have guided us through spring now face their most serious test. Moving deeper requires a complete change in how weight and balance are managed. The bottom, invisible beneath dark water, shifts constantly as the current scours sand and pebbles into new configurations with each passing moment. My hooves search for purchase on stones that may or may not support the next step, while the flow works to unbalance every movement with pressure that seems to increase exponentially with depth. The water climbs my legs with shocking efficiency, each inch bringing new cold that penetrates deeper than seems possible. By the time it reaches my belly, breathing has become a conscious effort against the constriction that extreme cold imposes on chest muscles. The current pushes against my side now, a constant lateral force that requires continuous correction to maintain forward progress toward the far bank that seems impossibly distant. Midstream presents the greatest challenge, where the water runs deepest and fastest, carrying the full accumulated power of winter's melting. Here the current transforms from mere impediment to active opponent, pushing against my chest with force that threatens to sweep me downstream toward obstacles I cannot see. My feet scramble for purchase on a bottom that shifts constantly, stones rolling away beneath each step, while the flow works to undermine any stability I manage to achieve. The herd spreads out across the crossing, each individual finding their own negotiation with the torrent, while maintaining loose contact with neighbors through sight and sound. The stallion forges ahead, his greater size and strength, allowing him to break trail through the worst of the current, while the rest of us follow in his wake, where the water runs slightly easier. The foals stay close to their mothers, sometimes so close that they seem to merge into single entities moving through the hostile environment. Steam rises from our backs, where body heat meets the frigid air above the water, creating small personal clouds that mark our progress across the flood. The contrast between the burning cold of the water and the relative warmth of our cores creates sensations that seem to war with each other, legs going numb, while internal organs work overtime to maintain essential functions. Breathing becomes visible architecture, each exhalation a small victory against the cold that threatens to steal vital heat. The current carries its own debris field of hazards that appear and disappear with frightening speed. Branches large enough to cause serious injury sweep past with velocity that would make impact devastating, while smaller debris creates a constant barrage of minor obstacles that must be avoided or endured. The water itself carries sediment that clouds visibility, making it impossible to see what lies beneath the surface until actually encountered. Halfway across, one of the younger mares loses her footing completely, disappearing beneath the surface for moments that stretch like hours before she emerges, gasping and disoriented, swept several lengths downstream from her intended path. The sight sends ripples of alarm through the entire group, mothers calling urgently to offspring while adults adjust positions to provide assistance if needed. The mare recovers her footing and continues, but the incident reminds us all of the stakes involved in this crossing. The foals struggle most with the crossing, their shorter legs providing less leverage against the current, while their lighter bodies offer more surface area for the water to push against. They learn quickly to stay in the lee of larger animals, using adult bodies as windbreaks against the worst of the flow. Their mothers move with exaggerated care, every step calculated to provide maximum stability for the vulnerable young ones who depend on maternal judgment for survival. As we near the far bank, the current's grip begins to ease, though it makes one final attempt to claim us by increasing in speed where the channel narrows between the last obstacles. Here, the water runs with concentrated force that tests every lesson learned during the crossing, demanding final reserves of strength and determination when exhaustion already weighs heavy on muscles that have fought the cold for what seems like hours. The first hooves to touch solid ground on the far side bring waves of relief that ripple through the entire herd. Each successful emergence from the torrent becomes a small celebration, bodies shaking vigorously to shed water and restore circulation, while voices call out in tones that mix triumph with residual anxiety. The foals emerge with coats plastered to their sides, looking smaller and more vulnerable than ever, but their eyes shine with the confidence that comes from surviving their first major test. Standing on the far bank, we gather to assess the cost of our passage. Everybody steams in the cool air as circulation gradually returns to extremities numbed by the crossing. The river continues its urgent conversation with itself, carrying the last of winter's hoarded snow toward distant destinations while we recover from our negotiation with its power. The grass here grows thick and sweet, reward for the risks we've taken to reach it. Smell of smoke. The first hint arrives on morning wind as nothing more than a faint, acrid touch that makes my nostrils flare with sudden alertness. Something burns in the distance, though the scent carries no immediate threat, merely information that fire exists somewhere beyond the familiar boundaries of our valley. I lift my head from grazing to test the air more carefully, passing the complex message that wind delivers from places I cannot see. The smell strengthens as the day progresses, evolving from subtle wrongness to unmistakable alarm. What began as distant smoke now carries the sharper notes of burning grass, wood heated beyond its natural limits, and something else, a metallic taste that speaks of lightning's violent kiss upon dry earth. The wind shifts direction frequently, sometimes bringing the scent so strong it makes my eyes water, other times allowing it to fade until I almost convince myself the danger has passed. Heat shimmers on the southern ridges where none should exist, distorting the familiar silhouettes of distant peaks into wavering mirages that dance with their own unstable energy. The air itself seems to thicken, carrying particles too small to see, but substantial enough to irritate throat and lungs with each breath. Birds that normally fill the morning with songs have fallen silent, their absence creating an unnatural quiet that amplifies the growing tension rippling through our herd. The stallion paces restlessly, his usual calm authority replaced by agitation that spreads through the band like water through parched earth. His head remains elevated, testing every wind current for information about the approaching threat, while his body language communicates urgency to followers who need no translation of his concern. The mares gather their foals closer, creating tight clusters of protection around the most vulnerable members of our group. A wall of orange light appears on the southern horizon, flickering like sunrise but wrong in every detail. This light moves laterally rather than climbing, spreading across ridgelines with hungry persistence that speaks of consumption rather than illumination. The sight triggers responses buried deep in genetic memory, ancestral knowledge of fire's power to remake landscapes in minutes, transforming familiar territory into hellscapes that offer no refuge for those caught unprepared. The wind brings new information now, carrying the sound of fire's advance, a crackling roar that builds steadily like approaching thunder but never fades into silence. Trees scream as sap boils within their trunks, exploding with reports that echo across the valley like gunshots. The very air seems to burn, superheated gases creating their own weather patterns that twist smoke into towering columns visible against the afternoon sky. Heat begins to penetrate our refuge, radiating from the advancing flames with intensity that makes breathing difficult even at this distance. The temperature rises noticeably, transforming the pleasant warmth of spring afternoon into something oppressive and threatening. Sweat appears on every flank, bodies responding to heat that promises to become unbearable long before the flames themselves arrive. Ash begins to fall like grey snow, coating everything with fine particles that taste of destruction. The flakes drift down with deceptive gentleness, settling on backs and manes with touches so light they might be mistaken for ordinary dust until the acrid flavor reaches the tongue. Each speck carries the story of something burned, grass, wood, perhaps entire trees reduced to weightless remnants that float on superheated air. The herd moves without discussion, ancient instincts overriding individual preferences in favor of collective survival. We flow across the valley floor like water seeking the path of least resistance, following terrain that offers the best hope of escape from the approaching inferno. The stallion leads with purpose now, his earlier agitation transformed into decisive action that brooks no hesitation from followers whose lives depend on his judgment. Behind us, the wall of flame crests the southern ridge with a roar that drowns out every other sound. Fire pours down the slope like liquid destruction, consuming everything in its path with an appetite that seems impossible to satisfy. Trees that have stood for decades disappear in moments, their accumulated years of growth converted to smoke and ash faster than the eye can follow. The ground itself seems to burn, dry grass creating carpets of flame that race ahead of the main fire with terrifying speed. Running becomes flight, muscles pumping with desperate efficiency, while lungs strain against air that grows thicker and hotter with each stride. The foals struggle to match the pace their mothers set, short legs working frantically to maintain contact with the protective herd, while exhaustion threatens to separate them from salvation. Every adult becomes a guardian now, positioning themselves to assist any young one who falters under the demands of escape. The fire creates its own weather, generating winds that fan the flames while showering us with embers that hiss when they strike sweat-dampened coats. These burning fragments pose their own threat, capable of igniting new fires ahead of the main blaze or causing serious burns if they find vulnerable skin. We shake constantly as we run, dislodging the glowing particles before they can do permanent damage. A creek appears across our path, its banks offering the first real hope of sanctuary since the flight began. We plunge into the water without hesitation, grateful for any barrier between ourselves and the pursuing flames. The cool liquid feels shocking against overheated skin, but provides relief that goes beyond mere temperature. Water represents safety in a world suddenly dominated by fire's hunger for destruction. From the creek's center, we watch the fire's edge approach with fascination mixed with terror. The flames tower above the surrounding landscape, creating their own orange sky that blots out the normal blue of afternoon. The heat radiating from this wall of destruction makes the air shimmer like a mirage, distorting everything beyond into wavering unreality. The sound overwhelms all other sensation, a continuous roar that speaks of power beyond any natural force we've encountered. The fire reaches the creek's opposite bank and pauses, its advance checked by the presence of water that refuses to burn. For long minutes, flames dance along the water's edge like frustrated predators denied their prey, reaching toward us with tongues of destruction that fall just short of causing harm. Embers continue to fall around us, hissing when they strike the protective water, while the air above shimmers with heat that makes breathing a conscious effort. Gradually, the fire's attention turns elsewhere, seeking easier fuel than the water-protected creatures huddled in the creek. The flames move laterally along the stream's course, following terrain that offers better opportunities for consumption, while leaving our immediate area to smolder with the remains of its passage. The roar begins to fade as the main body of fire moves on, though smoke continues to pour from thousands of small fires still burning among the ruins it has left behind. Hours pass before we dare to leave the creek's protection, emerging into a landscape transformed beyond recognition. Where morning brought familiar grasses and scattered trees, evening reveals a moonscape of ash and charred stumps. The ground radiates heat that makes every step uncomfortable, while the air carries the persistent taste of destruction that will linger for days to come. The silence that follows fire's passage seems profound after hours of constant roaring. No birds sing in this transformed world, no insects buzz among flowers that no longer exist. Only the occasional crack of cooling wood breaks the quiet, accompanied by the whisper of ash settling into configurations that will define this place until new growth reclaims the blackened earth. The human scent. The alien smell arrives on morning wind like a question without an answer, carrying notes that my nostrils struggle to categorize among the familiar catalogue of scents that define safety and threat. It speaks of creatures I have never encountered, wrapped in substances that exist nowhere in the natural world, processed hides that bear no resemblance to the animals they came from, metals heated and shaped by purposes I cannot fathom, and underneath it all, the unmistakable musk of intelligence foreign to everything my ancestors knew. Leather dominates the strange bouquet, but leather transformed beyond its original identity. Where the hides I know carry the honest smell of death and decomposition, this processed skin has been altered by chemicals that strip away natural odors and replace them with something sharp and artificial. The scent penetrates deeper than surface awareness, triggering responses in parts of my brain that have no words for what they perceive, only the growing certainty that something fundamentally different approaches our territory. Mixed with the leather comes the metallic tang of worked iron, bitter on the tongue and foreign to every instinct that guides my understanding of the world. This is not the clean mineral taste of stones or the honest rust that forms when metal meets weather, but something more complex, iron shaped by fire and intention into forms that nature never conceived. The smell speaks of tools and purposes that exist outside the organic cycles that govern everything I understand about existence. Beneath these manufactured odors lies the source, the smell of the creatures themselves. Their sweat carries notes that remind me distantly of other mammals, but twisted by diet and behavior so alien that the familiarity only emphasizes the differences. They consume things that leave traces in their skin that speak of fire-changed food, substances processed beyond recognition, and chemicals that have no place in any natural cycle of consumption and digestion. The stallion's reaction confirms my own unease, his body language shifting from casual alertness to focused tension that ripples through the herd like wind through grass. His nostrils flare wide as he tests the air repeatedly, trying to decode messages that don't fit into any category his experience provides. The way he holds his head speaks of confusion mixed with growing alarm, the posture of a creature confronting something outside the normal spectrum of threat and opportunity. Engine growl adds its voice to the cocktail of wrongness, a mechanical rumbling that bears no resemblance to any sound the natural world produces. The noise carries undertones of controlled explosion, metal grinding against metal, and the consumption of substances that burn in ways totally foreign to wood or grass fires. This is not the chaotic destruction of wildfire, but something more deliberate, power, harnessed and directed by intelligence that works according to rules I cannot begin to comprehend. The sound grows stronger as the unseen source approaches, bringing with it vibrations that travel through the ground and into my bones. The rhythm speaks of movement, but movement achieved through means that have nothing to do with muscle and sinew. Whatever creates this noise travels without the organic cadence of walking or running, maintaining speeds and consistency that no living creature could sustain. The very regularity of it feels threatening in ways that natural predators never could. Unease spreads through the herd like infection, each individual responding to signals that bypass conscious thought and speak directly to survival instincts refined through millions of years of evolution. Heads lift from grazing as attention focuses on threats that remain invisible but increasingly present. The foals press closer to their mothers, responding to tensions they don't understand but recognizing with perfect clarity that something has changed in their world. The wind shifts, bringing stronger concentrations of the alien scents that confirm the approach of whatever carries them. Now the odors arrive in waves that speak of multiple sources. Not one creature but several, all carrying the same combination of processed materials and foreign chemistry. The realization that this represents a group rather than an individual escalates the threat level beyond anything our defensive strategies have evolved to handle. New elements join the olfactory assault as the sources draw nearer. Rubber adds its distinctive petroleum-based signature to the mixture, speaking of materials created from substances extracted from deep within the earth and transformed by processes that exist nowhere in nature. The smell carries undertones of heat and pressure that suggest technologies beyond any natural force, ways of changing matter that transcend the simple cycles of growth and decay that govern organic existence. Gasoline fumes penetrate the air with sharp chemical clarity that makes my eyes water and throat burn. This is the scent of stored fire, energy concentrated and contained in forms that speak of power held in reserve for purposes I cannot imagine. The smell carries its own warning. This substance wants to burn, waits for the spark that will release its accumulated energy in ways that dwarf the destructive potential of any natural fire. The mechanical noises grow more complex as their sources approach, adding new layers to the auditory assault that speaks of multiple systems working in coordination. Metal clanks against metal with rhythms that suggest movement constrained by artificial joints, while other sounds hint at rotating elements, spinning with speeds no organic mechanism could achieve. The coordination of these various noises speaks of intelligence, but intelligence expressed through means that bear no resemblance to any natural behavior. Panic begins to build in the younger members of the herd, their inexperience leaving them unprepared for threats that fall so far outside normal categories of danger. The mares work to contain this rising hysteria, using voice and position to maintain group cohesion while their own stress levels climb toward breaking points. Every adult struggles with the dual challenge of managing personal fear while providing stability for those who depend on their leadership. The scents grow stronger still, bringing new information that adds layers to the developing picture of approach. Soap adds its artificial cleanliness to the mixture, speaking of creatures that alter their natural odors through chemical intervention. This deliberate masking of scent carries implications that disturb me on levels I cannot articulate, the suggestion of intelligence applied to concealment, of purposes that require hiding natural identity behind manufactured disguises. Human breath begins to register as a distinct component, carrying the complex chemistry of omnivorous diet that includes both plant and animal matter processed in ways that leave unnatural residues. The exhalations speak of teeth that have consumed cooked foods, substances heated beyond their natural state, and combined in ways that create entirely new chemical signatures. This is the breath of creatures whose relationship with their environment has been fundamentally altered by technologies that separate them from direct participation in natural cycles. The approaching presence feels overwhelming now, a convergence of alien scents and sounds that speaks of invasion by forces completely outside our experience. Every instinct refined through generations of survival screams warnings about threats that cannot be categorized or countered through any strategy our genetic heritage provides. We face something unprecedented, creatures whose very existence challenges everything we understand about the world and our place within it. The wind brings one final element that seems to encapsulate all the others, the scent of control itself, of intelligence applied to domination of environment through means that transcend natural capability. This is the smell of creatures who have stepped outside the normal boundaries of existence, who shape their world, rather than adapting to it, whose presence represents a fundamental challenge to the organic order that has governed life since the beginning of time. Round up chaos. The helicopter's mechanical thunder erupts from behind the eastern ridge like some metallic predator birthed from nightmares, its rotor blades chopping the morning air into fragments that seem to assault every sense simultaneously. The sound penetrates bone deep, a rhythmic pounding that drowns out heartbeat and breath, replacing the natural rhythms of life with something alien and relentless. My muscles lock with shock as this flying machine crests the skyline, hanging in the air through means that violate every law of physics my existence has taught me to trust. Dust explodes from beneath the mechanical beast as it hovers low over our grazing ground, rotor wash creating instant whirlwinds that strip grass from roots and send debris flying in all directions. The artificial wind carries the concentrated essence of everything wrong about the approaching humans, petroleum fumes mixed with hot metal and the chemical tang of materials that have no place in any natural cycle. My eyes stream as particles too fine to see penetrate every opening, coating throat and lungs with grit that tastes of industrial processes. The herd scatters like water hitting hot stone, each individual driven by panic that overrides rational thought and reduces existence to the simple imperative of escape. Bodies collide as we transform from organized group to desperate mob, our usual coordination shattered by terror that speaks directly to the deepest survival instincts. The foals cry out in voices made thin by fear, their high calls nearly lost beneath the overwhelming mechanical roar that seems to come from everywhere at once. Behind the helicopter, more humans appear on the ridgeline, figures mounted on horses but wrong in every detail that matters. These riders move with purpose that speaks of planned assault rather than casual encounter, their animals trained to purposes that have nothing to do with natural herd behavior. The sight of our own kind, corrupted into instruments of capture, sends shockwaves through my nervous system that feel like physical blows, betrayal layered upon the existing terror of mechanical pursuit. I run with muscles that burn from sudden explosive effort, legs pumping with desperate efficiency while lungs strain against air thick with dust and chemical fumes. The ground blurs beneath hooves that pound out rhythms of pure panic, each stride carrying me further from the mechanical horror, but never far enough to escape the sound that penetrates every cell of my body. Behind me, the helicopter follows with relentless patience, maintaining distance that speaks of control rather than aggression, the patience of a predator that knows its prey cannot escape. The terrain becomes enemy as well as refuge, familiar slopes transformed into obstacles by the desperate speed our flight demands. Rocks that never posed problems during normal movement now threaten disaster for feet, placed carelessly in headlong rush toward any horizon that might offer escape. Gullies that we would normally navigate with careful consideration become chasms to be leaped without thought for safe landing, survival reduced to the simple mathematics of forward motion versus capture. More helicopters appear from different directions, multiple mechanical predators coordinating their approach with precision that speaks of intelligence applied to hunting strategies beyond anything natural predators could conceive. The sound multiplies until it seems to come from the sky itself, rotor wash creating wind patterns that shift constantly and unpredictably, making every step uncertain as artificial weather systems clash and merge around our fleeing forms. The riders close in from the flanks, their horses moving with unnatural coordination that reduces them to extensions of human will, rather than independent creatures following their own instincts. These corrupted equines show no recognition of kinship with our wild band, their eyes reflecting training that has replaced natural responses with mechanical obedience to human commands. The sight fills me with revulsion that adds another layer to the existing terror, on the knowledge that capture, might mean transformation into something equally alien and wrong. Dust clouds merge and thicken until the world becomes a brown fog that limits visibility to mere yards, forcing navigation by sound and instinct while mechanical thunder continues its assault from overhead. The air becomes unbreathable, each inhalation bringing more grit and chemical contamination that burns throat and lungs with every breath. My body rebels against the punishment, muscles demanding oxygen that the poisoned atmosphere cannot adequately provide. A fence line appears through the dust like a revelation of hopelessness. 25. Metal barriers that speak of human intention to control movement and limit freedom. The posts march across the landscape with mechanical regularity that mirrors the helicopter's relentless rhythm, creating boundaries where none existed before, and channeling our desperate flight toward destinations chosen by our pursuers rather than our own survival needs. The wire glints with metallic hostility, promising injury to any creature desperate enough to test its resistance. The trap becomes visible as dust settles enough to reveal the true scope of human planning. Fencing extends in multiple directions, creating corridors that funnel our movement toward a narrowing point where capture becomes inevitable. The helicopters hover at strategic positions that deny escape through any route not predetermined by human design, while riders position themselves to close off the few remaining gaps in an encirclement that tightens with each passing moment. Terror transforms into something beyond panic as the walls close in, reducing the vast freedom of open range to an ever-shrinking space defined by human intention rather than natural boundaries. The fencing grows higher and more substantial as we approach the funnel's narrow end, posts becoming more frequent and wire more dense until escape through the barriers becomes impossible even for creatures driven by ultimate desperation. The sound of metal against metal adds its voice to the mechanical symphony as temporary gates clang shut behind us, cutting off retreat routes one by one. The chute narrows with each step, solid walls replacing wire barriers as human engineering forces us into ever more confined space. The passage ahead disappears into darkness that promises nothing good, while the walls press closer with each forward movement until shoulders brush against barriers that permit no deviation from the path they define. The smell of countless previous captives permeates the wooden walls, fear, sweat, and desperation soaked so deep into the grain that the very structures seem to exhale the essence of defeat. Breathing becomes conscious work as the combination of exertion, dust, and chemical contamination pushes lungs beyond their capacity to process the poisoned air effectively. Each breath requires effort that leaves less energy for the muscle work of continued flight, while the mechanical thunder continues its assault on nerves already pushed beyond their ability to process sensory input. My vision begins to narrow, peripheral awareness fading as the body concentrates remaining resources on the essential functions needed to maintain movement. The chute's end approaches with the inevitability of sunrise, wooden walls rising higher, while the passage grows narrower until only single-file movement remains possible. The sound of gates slamming echoes from behind, each metallic crash marking another option eliminated, another degree of freedom lost to human planning that has anticipated and countered every possible escape attempt. The darkness ahead promises nothing but submission to forces completely beyond our ability to resist or understand. Metal clangs with finality as the last gate closes, trapping us in space so confined that movement becomes impossible, breath so precious that each inhalation must be fought for against the pressure of bodies pressed together beyond any natural gathering. The helicopter's thunder finally begins to fade as its work reaches completion, leaving behind silence so profound it seems to echo with the sound of freedom's end. Corral stillness. The silence that follows capture feels heavier than any sound could ever be, pressing down upon us with the weight of confinement made real. Where moments before the world rang with mechanical thunder and the desperate percussion of hooves against earth, now only the whisper of disturbed dust settling speaks of the violence that brought us to this place. The corral stretches around us, in perfect geometric precision, its boundaries defined by rails that speak of human intention to contain what was never meant to be contained. Iron dominates the new olfactory landscape, cold metal that has absorbed the fierce sweat of countless previous prisoners while contributing its own bitter tang to air already thick with the residue of capture. The smell penetrates deeper than surface awareness, coating the back of my throat with flavors that speak of oxidation and industrial processes, of materials torn from the earth and shaped by fire into forms that serve purposes utterly foreign to natural cycles of growth and decay. Hay adds its voice to the alien bouquet, but hay transformed by human handling into something that bears only distant resemblance to the grass we once grazed freely. This fodder carries the concentrated essence of captivity, vegetation cut at human convenience, dried according to human schedules, and stored in ways that strip away the living connection between plant and soil that defines true nourishment. The scent promises sustenance while simultaneously announcing the end of choice in all matters concerning survival. Water appears in metal containers that reflect light with harsh efficiency, their surfaces unmarked by the organic patina that develops when stone and wood interact with flowing streams over time. The liquid itself tastes of processing, filtered and treated until it bears no resemblance to the sweet water that once bubbled over stones in our valley home. Each sip carries the chemical signature of human intervention, substances added to ensure purity by standards that have nothing to do with natural preferences or needs. The ground beneath our hooves has been stripped of everything that makes Earth alive, replaced with packed dirt that rings hollow under our weight. No grass grows here, no insects buzz among flowering plants, no organic matter cycles through the endless dance of decay and renewal that creates the rich soil matrix we once knew. This is Earth reduced to mere surface, functional space designed to facilitate human purposes rather than support the complex web of relationships that defines living landscape. Bodies pressed together not from choice but from the mathematical constraints of space calculated to contain rather than comfort. The closeness that once provided warmth and security during winter storms now becomes another source of stress, proximity forced by boundaries that permit no retreat when individual space becomes necessary. Every movement requires negotiation with neighbors equally desperate for room to breathe, creating friction where natural social order once provided harmony. Mutual grooming emerges as the first response to overwhelming stress, bodies seeking comfort through the familiar rituals that have always bound herds together in times of difficulty. Teeth work gently along necks and withers, following patterns established through thousands of years of evolution, finding in physical contact some small refuge from the alien environment that surrounds us. The simple act of cleaning another's coat becomes profound affirmation that essential identity survives even in this transformed world. My ears swivel constantly, scanning for information that might make sense of this new reality while simultaneously seeking comfort in the familiar sounds that survive capture. The breathing of my companions creates a subtle symphony that speaks of life continuing despite confinement, while the occasional stamp of hoof against packed earth provides percussion that reminds muscles and bones of their continued ability to move, however limited that movement has become. The rhythm of multiple hearts gradually synchronizes as initial panic subsides into the duller ache of acceptance, bodies finding their baseline despite circumstances that challenge every natural response. The frantic racing that accompanied capture slowly moderates into patterns more sustainable for long-term survival, though elevated rates continue to reflect the ongoing stress of confinement in spaces designed by minds that operate according to completely different principles than those that govern equine existence. Sunlight enters the corral through spaces between rails, creating patterns of illumination that shift throughout the day according to schedules, completely independent of human intention. This natural progression provides the only remaining connection to cycles that once defined existence, offering small comfort in the knowledge that some forces remain beyond human control, despite their apparent mastery over so many aspects of what was once wild freedom. Shadows move across the confined space with familiar regularity, marking time according to celestial mechanics that predate human civilization and will continue long after current arrangements become footnotes in geological history. The progression of light and dark creates islands of relative comfort where bodies can position themselves to maximize warmth while minimizing exposure to elements that seem harsher when escape becomes impossible. Wind continues to blow through the enclosure, carrying messages from the world beyond the rails that remind imprisoned bodies of landscapes that stretch beyond human sight and control. These scents arrive filtered through the immediate reality of confinement but retain enough of their original character to evoke memories of freedom that both comfort and torment. The aroma of distant grass mingles with nearby hay to create olfactory contradictions that speak of worlds existing simultaneously, one remembered, one imposed. Dust settles into configurations that will define this space until weather or human intervention disturbs the accumulated patterns of movement within constraint. Every footfall leaves its mark on surfaces that record the restless energy of creatures designed for vast territories, now forced to negotiate existence within boundaries that can be crossed in mere steps. The Earth accepts these impressions with the same patience it once showed for the tracks we left across miles of open range. Temperature regulation becomes more complex when movement options disappear, bodies forced to find comfort through positioning and social arrangement rather than the simple expedient of moving to more favorable locations. We learn to read the microclimates created by rail placement and shadow patterns, discovering which areas offer the best protection from wind while maintaining access to whatever sunlight penetrates the artificial environment. The corral's geometry imposes its own logic on social interaction, straight lines and right angles, forcing adjustments to movement patterns that evolved in landscapes where boundaries flowed according to natural contours rather than human engineering. Every turn becomes conscious navigation of space, designed for purposes other than equine comfort, while the lack of visual barriers creates exposure that leaves no refuge from the constant awareness of confinement. Night brings different challenges, as artificial boundaries become less visible while remaining equally real, darkness concealing the rails without diminishing their constraining power. Stars appear in the same configurations that once guided movement across open range, their familiar patterns now serving mainly to emphasize the contrast between celestial freedom and terrestrial imprisonment. The sky remains vast and unlimited, while everything beneath it has become subject to human control. Sleep comes in fragments interrupted by the ongoing stress of captivity, rest patterns disrupted by circumstances that challenge every instinct developed for survival in natural environments. Dreams of open spaces mingles with waking awareness of constraint, creating psychological terrain as complex and difficult as the physical reality of life, within barriers that permit survival, while denying the essential freedom that once defined existence itself.